The USS Enterprise had been tracking the anomaly for 3 hours. Subspace distortion holding steady at Mark 7.3. Lieutenant Commander Data reported from his ops station, golden eyes fixed on readings that defied conventional physics. Captain, the quantum signature is unlike anything in our database. It appears to originate from outside our dimensional framework entirely. Captain Jean-Luc Picard stepped forward, studying the swirling violet maelstrom on the view screen. Space itself seemed wounded there, reality bleeding into something else. Recommendations, number 1? Commander William Riker leaned against the tactical rail, frowning. We're 30 light years from the nearest starbase. If this thing expands or destabilizes, we're the only ship in range to respond. I say we investigate, but keep our distance. Agreed. Mr. Data, full sensor sweep. I want to know what we're dealing with before. The rift exploded. Not outward, but inward. A violent collapse that sent shockwaves rippling through subspace. Alarms shrieked across the bridge as the Enterprise bucked, artificial gravity compensators struggling to adjust. Through the chaos, something emerged from the dying anomaly. Not a ship, a figure, a man, suspended in the vacuum of space, surrounded by a shimmering aura of electromagnetic energy that bent light itself around him. His cape, red, defiant against the star field, billowed as though caught in solar winds. The metal helmet covering his head reflected the Enterprise's running lights like a crown of cold judgment. Impossible, breathed Lieutenant Commander Worf from Tactical. No humanoid can survive unprotected in space. But this one did. This one floated there, arms outstretched, and even through the view screen, Picard could feel the weight of his gaze, ancient, wounded, and utterly unafraid. Life signs, Mr. Data? Confirmed, Captain. Single humanoid life form. Electromagnetic field strength. Captain, his personal shielding is generating 0.73 terawatts. That's equivalent to a Galaxy-class starship's full deflector array. Counselor Deanna Troy's hands gripped her chair. Captain, I'm sensing... She gasped, face paling. Rage, calculated fury, and confusion. He doesn't know where he is, but he's already deciding if we're a threat. The figure raised one hand. On the Enterprise's hull, metallic groans echoed through the superstructure. Shields holding, Worf reported, but his voice carried an edge Picard rarely heard from his Klingon officer. Minor fluctuations across all frequencies. Captain, something is testing our defenses. Hail him, all frequencies. Data's fingers danced across his console. Channel open, sir. Picard straightened, adopting the diplomatic bearing that had resolved conflicts across 2 quadrants. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. You have emerged from an unstable quantum anomaly. We mean you no harm. Do you require assistance? For a long moment, silence. Then the figure moved, drifting closer with fluid grace, and Picard realized with cold certainty that this being wasn't drifting at all. He was flying, propelled by forces that had nothing to do with thrusters or propulsion systems. When the voice came through the comm, it was deep, accented with old-world European inflection, and carried the weight of someone who had commanded armies. I require answers. Where am I? What year is this? And why does your vessel carry enough refined metal to build a small city? Data's positronic brain processed the questions instantly. Sir, we are in Sector 221G of the Alpha Quadrant. The stardate is 53847.2, which in your apparent frame of reference would be late 2376 by the Gregorian calendar. As for our vessel's composition, the Enterprise is constructed primarily of duranium, tritanium, and polyduranide alloys, Standard for Starfleet. Starfleet. The word was tasted, analyzed. Not SHIELD, not the Air Force. You're not from Earth, are you? Or rather, not from my Earth. Picard exchanged glances with Riker. Dimensional displacement theory wasn't just academic anymore. You're correct. If you've crossed dimensional barriers, your reality and ours may share certain constants, but diverge significantly. We can help you understand your situation, but first, we need to establish trust. I'm lowering our shields as a gesture of good faith. Captain, Worf began. Do it. The shields flickered off. The Enterprise hung naked before this impossible stranger. And Picard watched the figure tilt his head, perhaps surprised, perhaps calculating odds. You're either very brave or very foolish, Captain Picard. In my experience, those who lead warships rarely lower their defenses for strangers. He drifted closer still, until his boots, somehow magnetized to an invisible platform of force, were level with the bridge view screen. I am Erik Lehnsherr. Some call me Magneto, and I have just emerged from a battle to save my people from genocide, only to find myself here, wherever here is. Troy leaned forward. Captain, he's telling the truth. The grief is overwhelming. He believes his people, mutants he calls them, are in danger. Then we can help, Picard said simply. The Federation has encountered countless species, Mr. Lehnsherr. Whatever persecution your people face, we have resources, diplomatic channels, and a commitment to protecting all sentient life. Transport aboard and we'll... Transport? Magneto's laugh was bitter. You want to disassemble my molecules and reassemble them inside your metal cage? Captain, I've spent decades ensuring no one puts me in a cage ever again. His hand clenched, and across the Enterprise's hull, the metallic groan returned, louder, spreading like a living thing through every deck. But I appreciate the irony. Your ship, this magnificent vessel of exploration. He spread his arms, and compartments throughout the Enterprise began rattling. Is made entirely of materials I control? Tell me, Captain, how do you negotiate with someone who could crush your ship like an empty can? Red alert klaxons wailed. Worf's hands flew across tactical. Sir, hull stress increasing across sections 7 through 42. He's manipulating the structural integrity field. If he continues, stand down, Mr. Worf. Picard kept his voice calm, though his heart hammered. This being, this Magneto, had just demonstrated the ability to destroy the Enterprise and everyone aboard. Yet he'd issued a warning instead. Mr. Lehnsherr, you've made your point. You're powerful, formidable. But power without purpose is simply destruction. You said your people faced genocide. The Federation has stood against such horrors since our founding. We don't negotiate from positions of strength or weakness. We negotiate from principles. So I ask you, will you crush us, or will you learn what kind of universe you've entered? The pressure on the hull ceased. Magneto floated there, studying Picard through the view screen with eyes that had witnessed humanity's capacity for evil firsthand. Principles, he repeated softly. I've heard that word before, Captain. Usually just before someone explains why principles don't apply to my people. But very well. I'll accept your hospitality on my terms. Your transporter stays offline. I'll enter through your hangar bay. And Captain? His voice hardened to cold iron. If this is a trap, if there are weapons waiting, if Section 31 or whoever you people have developed thinks they can contain me, your ship will become a tomb before I allow myself to be caged again. Picard nodded slowly. Understood, Mr. Data, depressurize Shuttle Bay 2 and open the exterior doors. Mr. Lehnsherr, you have my word. The Federation does not cage its guests. As the figure in red and purple began his approach, Troy whispered urgently, "Captain, he means every word. He's been imprisoned before, experimented on. He'll die before he lets it happen again." "Then we won't give him cause to fight," Picard replied. But even as he said it, he wondered, in a universe of technology, what do you do when you meet a man who renders all technology obsolete? The master of magnetism was coming aboard, and the Federation was about to discover that some powers couldn't be contained by shields, diplomacy, or ideals. Only by the fragile hope that somewhere beneath the rage, Erik Lehnsherr remembered what it meant to be more than a weapon. If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together. The shuttle bay doors opened wide. A crimson figure descended through the magnetic bottle atmospheric containment field. And the 24th century prepared to meet the 20th century's most dangerous revolutionary. Shuttle Bay 2 had been cleared of personnel per Picard's orders, leaving only the skeletal frameworks of Type 9 shuttlecraft and the vast duranium deck, plating stretching toward the opening where stars glittered cold and infinite. Magneto descended through the atmospheric force field like a messiah returning to judgment, electromagnetic aura shimmering violet blue as it interfaced with the shuttle bay's confinement protocols. His boots touched deck plating with a soft metallic ring that somehow carried through the entire bay, a declaration of arrival that resonated through the ship's very skeleton. He stood there for a moment, hands at his sides, breathing recycled air that tasted of ozone and sterile filtration. His eyes swept the bay, cataloging everything: the shuttles, the support equipment, the magnetic grapples designed to secure small craft. Every single object contained metals he could sense like extensions of his own nervous system. The entire ship hummed with electromagnetic potential, a symphony of power waiting to be conducted. "Fascinating," he murmured, raising one hand. A tricorder abandoned on a maintenance cart flew across the bay and into his palm without him looking at it. He turned it over, examining the casing, the internal circuitry visible to senses that perceived magnetic fields the way others saw color. Such miniaturization, such elegance. In my world, technology like this would be. He crushed it, the tricorder compacted into a metal ball no larger than a marble. A weapon. The shuttle bay doors hissed open. Captain Picard entered alone, unarmed, hands clasped behind his back in a posture that somehow conveyed both authority and openness. Behind him, at a respectful distance, stood Data and Worf, the android's curiosity evident, the Klingon's hand hovering near his phaser. "Mr. Lehnsherr," Picard began, stopping 10 meters away. "Welcome aboard the Enterprise. I appreciate your restrained demonstration." Magneto's lips quirked. "Restrained? Captain, if I weren't restrained, your ship would be a debris field. This..." He gestured at the crushed tricorder, which he allowed to drop with a clatter that echoed like a gunshot. "Was merely curiosity. Your technology is impressive, but it's all built on a foundation I control. Every circuit, every relay, every structural support." His eyes locked onto Picard's. "Do you understand what that means? In my world, I've lifted entire stadiums, manipulated the Earth's magnetic field, torn sentinels, war machines designed specifically to kill my kind, into scrap metal. Here, in your universe of starships and space stations, I'm not just powerful, I'm inevitable." Data tilted his head, processing. "A logical assessment. However, Mr. Lehnsherr, power does not necessarily correlate with purpose. May I inquire as to your intentions now that you find yourself in our reality? My intentions? Magneto's voice dropped, carrying the weight of decades fighting an endless war. I intend to return home. My people, mutants, the next step in human evolution, are being hunted, imprisoned, killed for the crime of being born different. I was in the middle of defending a mutant sanctuary when your quantum anomaly tore me away. Every moment I'm here, they're dying. Picard's expression softened with genuine empathy. I understand your urgency. The Federation has encountered species facing extinction. We have protocols, resources. Protocols? Magneto laughed, but there was no humor in it. Captain, I've heard every variation of, we'll handle it through proper channels while bodies piled up. I watched my family die in Auschwitz while the world promised intervention. I've seen mutant children shot in the streets while governments debated their rights. Your protocols mean nothing to me. Results do. He began walking forward, boots ringing against deck plating, and something about his gait, the confidence, the predatory grace, made Worf's hand close around his phaser grip. Magneto noticed. Your Klingon warrior is ready to draw his weapon, he said without looking. Tell him that if he does, I'll turn it inside out before the beam leaves the emitter. I can sense the magnetic coils, the power cell, the targeting mechanism. It's all metal, all mine. Worf, Picard said quietly. Stand down. The Klingon growled, but complied. Magneto stopped 3 meters from Picard, studying the captain with eyes that had judged countless humans and found most wanting. You're different, Magneto observed. Most humans fear what they don't understand. You're afraid. I can sense the elevated iron in your blood, the adrenaline. But you're here anyway. Why? Because fear is not a reason to abandon principles, Picard replied evenly. You mentioned Auschwitz. I've studied Earth's history extensively, Mr. Lehnsherr. The Holocaust was humanity's darkest hour, a systematic attempt to eradicate an entire people based on hatred and fear. But humanity learned. We evolved beyond such barbarism. The Federation was founded on the principle that infinite diversity in infinite combinations is not something to fear, but to celebrate. Magneto's jaw tightened. Pretty words. I've heard them before, usually from politicians who don't have to watch their children die. Then let me show you something beyond words. Picard gestured toward the bay doors. You've sensed our ship's composition, our technology. Now see our people. Data, would you provide Mr. Lehnsherr with access to our cultural database? The android stepped forward, producing a pad from his uniform. He offered it to Magneto, who eyed it suspiciously before taking it. The moment his fingers touched the device, it hummed. Subtle magnetic interference causing the display to flicker. My apologies, Magneto said without sincerity. My presence disrupts your electronics. On the contrary, Data replied. I find it fascinating. Your bioelectromagnetic field is generating approximately 1.3 Tesla at close range. Most impressive. The PADD contains information on Federation member species, our charter, and historical records of how we've addressed conflicts similar to what you describe. Magneto scrolled through files with one hand, his other unconsciously manipulating the metal fragments of the destroyed tricorder, making them orbit his palm like electrons around a nucleus. His expression shifted as he absorbed information. Vulcans achieving peace through logic, Klingons evolving beyond conquest, the Federation's stance on genetic augmentation, the eugenics wars, Khan Noonien Singh, You fought your own wars over genetic superiority, he noted. This Khan, he believed engineered humans should rule. You defeated him, then banned augmentation. Isn't that exactly the kind of fear-driven persecution I'm fighting against? Picard shook his head. Khan sought domination. The ban on genetic augmentation was implemented not from fear of superiority, but from the hard lesson that creating deliberate hierarchies based on genetics leads to tyranny. But he raised a hand before Magneto could interrupt. We've also learned that naturally evolved variations, like telepathic betazoids or long-lived Vulcans, enrich our civilization. The key distinction is choice versus coercion, cooperation versus domination. And where do I fall on that spectrum, Captain? Magneto's eyes gleamed with challenge. A mutant born with power over one of the fundamental forces of nature. Am I enrichment or threat? That depends entirely on what you choose to do with your power. The shuttle bay fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems Magneto could disable with a thought. He studied Picard for a long moment, then looked past him to Data and Worf. An android and a Klingon serving together on a human ship. A crew of dozens of species working in harmony. It was everything the X-Men preached. Everything Charles Xavier believed possible. And Magneto had stopped believing in Xavier's dream decades ago. Your Federation is impressive, Magneto admitted. A genuine attempt at what my old friend Charles always wanted, peaceful coexistence. But it's also built on a foundation I could destroy in minutes. Every starship, every space station, every weapon you possess, all vulnerable to me. That's not coexistence, Captain. That's you living at my mercy. Or, Picard countered, it's us trusting that you're more than your power. That you're a man who's fought for his people's survival, not a tyrant seeking to dominate. There's a difference, Mr. Lehnsherr. I believe you know it. Magneto's fist clenched. The metal fragments orbiting his hand suddenly shot outward, embedding themselves in the shuttle bay walls with sounds like gunfire. Worf drew his phaser. Data shifted into a defensive stance, but Magneto simply stood there, trembling with an emotion Picard couldn't quite identify. Rage, grief, or perhaps the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting so long he'd forgotten what peace looked like. Your trust is naive, Magneto said quietly. In my experience, it's always betrayed. Then perhaps, Picard replied, you've been in the wrong universe. The words hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Magneto opened his mouth to respond, when suddenly the Enterprise's comm system crackled to life. A signal that bypassed normal protocols, impossible without authorized access codes. Enterprise, this is Romulan warbird Valdor. We've been monitoring your guest. Fascinating readings. We believe we can help him return to his dimension of origin for the right price. Picard's expression hardened. How long have you been in Federation space? Long enough to see your quantum anomaly and realize what came through. Captain, you're harboring a being of immense power who doesn't belong to your reality. We're offering a solution, unless, of course, you'd prefer to keep such a dangerous weapon for yourself. Magneto's eyes narrowed. Weapon, there's that word again. He looked at Picard. So much for your enlightened Federation, Captain. It seems even here, I'm just a tool to be used. The bridge of the Enterprise hummed with controlled tension as Picard strode from the turbolift, Magneto floating behind him with arms crossed. A deliberate statement that he would neither walk like a prisoner nor accept the ship's internal gravity as mandatory. Data and Worf flanked them, the Klingon's hand still hovering near his phaser despite knowing its futility. On screen, Picard ordered. The view screen shimmered. replacing the star field with the predatory lines of a Romulan warbird. The Valdora hung in space like a raptor waiting to strike, its green hull reflecting the Enterprise's running lights. On the bridge, Commander Tomalak sat in his command chair with the confident smirk of someone holding superior cards. "Captain Picard," Tomalak purred. "It's been too long. I see you've made a new friend. How very Starfleet of you. Invite the dangerous anomaly aboard, offer tea and philosophical discussions." Picard's voice could have cut duranium. "You're in violation of the Treaty of Algeron, Commander. Federation space is off limits to Romulan vessels without prior authorization. A technicality I'm willing to overlook if you're willing to overlook my presence. After all, we're both here for the same reason now." Tomalak's gaze shifted to Magneto. "Mr. Lehnsherr, I presume? Your electromagnetic signature is quite remarkable. Our sensors registered your arrival from 3 sectors away. The power readings are extraordinary. Tell me, in your universe, are there many like you?" Magneto drifted forward until he was level with Picard, studying the Romulan with the same calculating intensity he'd shown the captain earlier. "Enough. What do you want?" "Direct." "I appreciate that." Tomalak stood, clasping his hands behind his back in a mirror of Picard's own gesture. A deliberate mockery. "I want to offer you what the Federation cannot: honesty. Picard will dress his intentions in noble rhetoric, but ultimately he'll want to study you, contain you, ensure you're not a threat. That's what his precious Federation does with power it doesn't understand. They'll smile, they'll debate, they'll form committees, and while they debate, you'll remain stranded. And the Romulan Star Empire is different." Magneto's voice carried skepticism honed by decades of manipulative offers. "We're honest about power. You have it. We respect it. The Romulan Empire was built by those strong enough to seize what they wanted, cunning enough to hold it. We don't apologize for survival, Mr. Lehnsherr. We celebrate it." Tomalak's smirk widened. "Our scientists have been studying quantum dimensional mechanics for years. We have the technology to open a stable rift back to your universe. All we ask in return is cooperation." "Cooperation," Magneto repeated flatly. "Another word for servitude. Another word for alliance." Tomalak leaned forward. "Your people are dying while you're trapped here. We can send you home today, right now. The Federation will take months studying the problem, forming subcommittees, consulting with their allies. How many of your mutants will die while Picard schedules meetings?" Riker stepped forward, anger tightening his features. "That's a lie, and you know it. We dedicate every resource to ensuring he's not a threat first." Tomalak interrupted smoothly. "Don't insult his intelligence, Commander. Mr. Lehnsherr has clearly survived by understanding when he's being managed. The Federation manages. We enable." Magneto turned to Picard, electromagnetic fields causing console displays across the bridge to flicker and distort. "Is he right, Captain? Would you prioritize studying me over returning me home?" Picard met his gaze without flinching. "I would prioritize understanding the full implications of the dimensional breach before attempting to manipulate it further. Not from fear of you, but from responsibility to both universes. Opening a rift without proper analysis could destabilize reality itself, potentially destroying your world and mine. That's not management, Mr. Lehnsherr. That's prudence. Prudence is a luxury my people can't afford." "Then consider this," Data interjected, his positronic brain processing tactical data at computer speed. "Commander Tomalak's vessel arrived suspiciously soon after your emergence from the quantum anomaly. The Valdor was positioned precisely to intercept sensor readings. This suggests premeditation. The Romulans were monitoring the Federation's dimensional research. Any technology they possess to return you home likely requires them to study you first. They simply won't admit it. Tomalak's expression flickered, barely, but enough. Magneto caught it. "He's lying," Magneto stated. It wasn't a question. "Romulan standard operating procedure," Worf growled. "They speak of honor while sharpening knives for your back." Tomalak's facade cracked, revealing irritation beneath the diplomatic veneer. "Such paranoia. Very well, I'll be completely transparent. Yes, we'd need to study your abilities. Yes, we'd ask for certain demonstrations of your power in exchange for our assistance. But unlike the Federation, we won't pretend otherwise. We'd give you a warbird to command, resources, respect. You'd be a valued ally, not a curiosity to be protected from itself." A warbird, Magneto mused. And for the first time since arriving, something like dark amusement touched his features. A vessel made of refined metals, powered by an artificial quantum singularity contained by magnetic fields. "Commander, do you have any idea what I could do to such a ship?" The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop. Magneto raised one hand, and across the view screen, the Valdor's hull began to groan. A sound transmitted through the vacuum by electromagnetic manipulation of the ship's communications array. Lights flickered on the Romulan bridge. Consoles sparked. "I could tear your ship apart from the inside out," Magneto continued, voice soft and terrible. "I could reverse your magnetic containment and turn your singularity core into a black hole that devours your entire crew. I could puppet your vessel like a toy, force you to fire on your own installations, make you dance like a marionette while I pull strings made of your own hull plating. So let's dispense with the fiction that I'd be your ally, Commander. You want a weapon? The Federation wants a study subject. Everyone wants to use me." He turned, electromagnetic aura flaring bright enough to cast shadows across the bridge. "I've spent my entire life being used. By the Nazis, who tattooed a number on my arm. By governments who weaponized my people when convenient and imprisoned us when we became inconvenient. By friends who wanted me to be gentle while my children died. I'm done being anyone's tool." The hull groaning ceased. The Valdor's systems stabilized. But the message was clear. Magneto had demonstrated restraint, not inability. Picard stepped forward, positioning himself between Magneto and the view screen. A symbolic gesture, but meaningful. "Then don't be a tool. Be a guest, a consultant. Someone who helps us understand your situation so we can help you resolve it. No cages, no weapons programs. Just cooperation between equals working toward a common goal." "Equals?" Magneto laughed bitterly. "Captain, I could reduce this ship to scrap in minutes. How are we equals?" "Because power isn't what makes equals," Counselor Troy said quietly, speaking for the first time since they'd reached the bridge. She'd been monitoring Magneto's emotional state, and what she sensed beneath the rage and suspicion broke her heart. "You're equal because you're a person, not a weapon. Because you have thoughts, feelings, rights, regardless of your abilities. That's what equality means in the Federation." Magneto stared at her, then at Picard, then at the diverse crew manning their stations. A Klingon at tactical, a Betazoid counselor, an android at ops, a human captain. All serving together, all trusted with the ship's safety. "Your idealism is either inspiring or suicidal," Magneto said finally. "I haven't decided which." "Perhaps both," Picard allowed. "But it's an idealism that's built a civilization spanning thousands of worlds, Mr. Lehnsherr. It works, not perfectly. We've made mistakes, fought wars, struggled with our principles. But we've survived by believing that sentient beings can be more than their base instincts, more than their weapons, more than their power. On the view screen, Tomalak's expression had shifted from smug to frustrated. Mr. Lehnsherr, don't be swayed by Federation propaganda. They preach equality while maintaining hierarchies. They claim to celebrate diversity while enforcing conformity to their values. Ask yourself, how many truly powerful beings serve freely in Starfleet? How many are studied, contained, filed away as too dangerous? The Metrons, the Organians. Q. The Federation fears genuine power. And the Romulans worship it, Picard countered. Which leads to constant conquest, eternal paranoia, and a society built on treachery. Mr. Lehnsherr has fought against oppression. Why would he choose to serve an empire built on oppressing others? Magneto's hands clenched. Don't presume to know what I'd choose. Then choose, Picard said simply. Not between us and them. Choose what kind of person you want to be in this universe. The weapon Tomalak wants, the threat Section 31 would try to contain, or someone who uses his power to build rather than destroy. You assume I want to build anything here? I want to go home. And we'll help you, Picard assured. But not recklessly. Not by tearing holes in reality without understanding the consequences. If we send you home and destabilize the dimensional barriers in the process, we could doom both universes. Would you risk your people for impatience? It was the right question. Magneto's entire existence was defined by protecting mutant kind. The idea that returning could somehow endanger them made him pause, electromagnetic fields dimming as he considered implications he hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Tomalak sensed the shift. Captain Picard speaks of consequences, but he offers no timeline. How long would his analysis take? Months? Years? Your people don't have that time, Mr. Lehnsherr. Every day you're here, they die. We can act now. You can act recklessly, Data corrected. Preliminary analysis of the quantum anomaly suggests it was not naturally occurring. Something in our universe interacted with something in Mr. Lehnsherr's universe to create a dimensional intersection point. Simply reversing the process without understanding the catalyst risks creating cascade failures across multiple realities. The Romulans possess advanced quantum singularity technology, but they lack the Federation's research into multidimensional physics. Their solution would likely be crude and dangerous. Magneto looked at Data with new interest. You're a machine, but you think like this? I am a sentient artificial life form, Data replied. And I understand what it means to be judged by what I am, rather than who I am. In that respect, Mr. Lehnsherr, we may have more in common than you think. The bridge fell silent except for the ambient hum of systems Magneto could feel like a second heartbeat. He was surrounded by technology, by beings who claimed to value him as a person despite his power. In his universe, that had always been a lie. But here, in this strange future where humanity had somehow achieved the dream Xavier always preached. I'll give you 3 days, Magneto said finally. 3 days to prove you're different from every human government I've ever dealt with. 3 days to show me your Federation is more than pretty words and naive idealism. If you succeed, I'll help with your analysis. If you fail, his eyes hardened. I'll take the Romulan offer, or I'll tear reality open myself and deal with the consequences. Picard nodded slowly. Agreed. 3 days. On the view screen, Tomalak's frustration was palpable. A mistake, Mr. Lehnsherr. The Federation will disappoint you. They always do. When they fail, The Romulan Star Empire will be waiting with open arms and actual solutions. Then you won't mind waiting 3 days, Magneto replied. Unless your offer wasn't as generous as you claimed? Tomalak's jaw tightened. Without another word, the transmission cut. The Valdor engaged its cloaking device and vanished from sensors. But everyone on the bridge knew they were still out there, watching, waiting. Magneto turned to Picard. I meant what I said, Captain. 3 days. Prove to me that in this universe, the powerful and the different aren't just weapons to be used or threats to be contained. Prove Charles Xavier's dream can actually work. Then let me start, Picard said, by offering you quarters, not a cell. Freedom to move about the ship, not confinement, and access to our historical and cultural database, so you can judge our civilization by its record, not just our promises. Magneto studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Very well, Captain. But know this. I'll be watching. And I can sense every weapon, every force field, every contingency plan hidden in your ship's metal skeleton. If I detect any attempt to cage me, to weaponize me, to treat me as anything less than a person. He gestured, and a decorative metal strip tore itself from the wall, reshaped into a perfect sphere, and crushed down to the size of a pea before his eyes. Your ship becomes a coffin. Understood, Picard said calmly. Computer, assign guest quarters to Mr. Erik Lehnsherr. Full environmental controls and access to non-classified databases. As Magneto followed Lieutenant Commander Data toward the turbo lift, Riker leaned close to Picard and whispered, 3 days to convert a revolutionary who spent decades fighting humanity. No pressure. Indeed, Picard replied, watching the master of magnetism depart. But if we fail, number one, it won't just be our ship at stake. It will be proof that even in the 24th century, humanity hasn't learned to trust those different from themselves. And that's a failure the Federation can't afford. The turbo lift doors closed. Magneto was loose on the Enterprise. And somewhere in the darkness, a Romulan warbird waited for the inevitable betrayal. 3 days to prove paradise was real. 3 days to show a Holocaust survivor that humanity had evolved beyond hate. 3 days to prevent the master of magnetism from becoming the 24th century's greatest threat. Deck 8, Section 12. Guest quarters designed for visiting dignitaries, spacious by starship standards, with a viewport offering an unobstructed view of the stars. Magneto stood before the transparent aluminum window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the infinite darkness beyond. He'd been motionless for 20 minutes, simply staring, processing the reality that he was no longer in his universe, perhaps never would be again. The door chime sounded. Come, Magneto said without turning. Captain Picard entered, carrying a tray with 2 glasses and a bottle. I thought you might appreciate something other than replicated refreshment. This is a 2346 Chateau Picard, from my family's vineyard in France, one of the few genuine luxuries I allow myself. Magneto finally turned, eyebrow raised. You're trying to civilize me with wine. I'm trying to speak with you as one man to another, not as captain to potential threat. Picard set the tray on the small table, poured 2 glasses with practiced ease. In my experience, some of the most important conversations happen away from bridge protocols and rank structures. And if I decided to crush your skull while we're alone? Magneto's voice was casual, but the threat was real. I can sense the iron in your blood, Captain. 0.04% of your body mass. Enough to manipulate, to rupture vessels, to kill you before you could call for help. Picard picked up both glasses, held one out to Magneto. Then I suppose I'm trusting that you're more interested in conversation than murder. Am I wrong? For a long moment, Magneto simply stared at the offered glass. In his universe, such gestures were always preludes to betrayal. Trust was a weapon used against him. But this man, this captain who commanded a vessel Magneto could destroy, stood there with wine and open hands, betting his life on the possibility that Erik Lehnsherr was still human beneath the helmet. Magneto took the glass. You're either the bravest man I've met or the most foolish. I've been called both. Picard settled into a chair, gestured to another. Please sit. Tell me about your world, about your people. Magneto remained standing, swirling the wine, studying its color against the starlight. My people. Mutants. Homo superior. The next step in human evolution, born with genetic variations that grant us abilities your science would call impossible. Telepathy, healing factors, energy manipulation, shape-shifting, and in my case, complete dominion over magnetism and the electromagnetic spectrum. He took a sip. The wine was genuine, complex, earthy, nothing like the synthetic approximations he'd tasted before. A small thing, but it spoke to Picard's sincerity. We're hunted, Magneto continued, voice hardening. Governments build machines called Sentinels specifically designed to identify and kill us. Parents abandon children when their mutations manifest. Scientists perform experiments on captured mutants, treating us like lab rats. We're forced into camps, required to register like criminals, blamed for every tragedy, whether we're involved or not. His fist clenched around the glass stem. It should have shattered, but his control was perfect. I've watched children burn because their skin was blue. I've buried friends who dared to dream of peace. And I've fought, Captain. I've fought with everything I am to ensure my people survive, even if humanity has to burn for it. Picard absorbed this in silence, then spoke carefully. Your anger is justified. The persecution you describe is unconscionable. But burning humanity, doesn't that make you what they fear you are? Does it? Magneto's eyes blazed. When the Nazis rounded up my people in Poland, when they tattooed numbers on our arms and marched us into camps, when they worked us to death and threw our bodies into mass graves, were the Allies wrong to fight back with violence? Were they monsters for bombing German cities, for killing enemy soldiers, for doing whatever was necessary to stop genocide? The Allies fought to stop oppression, not to establish dominance over another people, Picard countered. There's a difference between defense and supremacy. Is there? Magneto set his glass down with controlled precision. When you're powerful enough to ensure your people never suffer again, when you can prevent the next Holocaust before it begins, isn't that supremacy just another word for survival? My old friend Charles Xavier preaches coexistence. He builds schools where mutant children learn alongside humans, where we pretend that education and understanding will solve hatred. And every year, more of his students die. Every year, humanity builds better weapons. Tell me, Captain, how many times should we forgive those who murder our children before we're allowed to fight back? Picard leaned forward. I won't claim to have easy answers. Earth's history is stained with the blood of those deemed different. But we learned. We evolved. It took nuclear war, eugenics conflicts, and the near extinction of our species. But we learned. The Federation exists because humanity finally understood that diversity isn't a threat. It's our greatest strength. After how many bodies? Magneto challenged. How many genocides did it take for humanity to evolve? How many people like me had to die before your precious Federation decided that maybe, just maybe, persecution was wrong? Too many. Picard admitted quietly. Far too many. World War III alone killed 600 million people. The eugenics wars before that killed millions more. We nearly destroyed ourselves before we found a better path. But we did find it, Mr. Lehnsherr. That's the point. Change is possible. Magneto laughed bitterly. Change, yes. After the threat was eliminated. After the augments were defeated. You banned genetic enhancement. After the war machines were destroyed, you built a paradise. But what about those who are naturally different? What about those born with power? You say you celebrate diversity, but I haven't seen any evidence of beings like me in your Starfleet. Because beings with your specific abilities are rare. Data's voice came from the doorway. The android stood there, having arrived silently, as only a synthetic being could. But perhaps I can provide relevant context. May I enter? Magneto gestured permission. Data stepped inside, posture relaxed, hands visible, body language designed to project non-threat. I am Lieutenant Commander Data, second officer of the Enterprise. I am an artificial life form, a sentient android constructed by Dr. Noonien Soong. When I first entered Starfleet Academy, many questioned whether I should be allowed. Some argued I was merely a sophisticated machine, that granting me personhood would set dangerous precedents. There were legal challenges, ethical debates, even attempts to disassemble me for study. Magneto's eyes narrowed. And yet you serve. Because Captain Picard fought for my rights. Because he testified before Starfleet Command that sentience is not defined by origin, but by the capacity for growth, choice, and self-determination. He risked his career to establish legal precedent that I am a person, not property. Data met Magneto's gaze with his golden eyes. The Federation is not perfect. We struggle with questions of what constitutes personhood, how to balance individual rights with collective security when intervention is justified. But we struggle honestly. We debate. We evolve. That is what separates us from the societies you've known. Pretty words from a machine, Magneto said, but there was less venom in it. Tell me, Commander, do you dream of electric sheep? Do you understand what it means to be feared for what you are? I have been feared, Data replied. I have been called emotionless, alien, dangerous. My positronic brain processes information millions of times faster than organic minds. I am stronger than most humanoids. I do not age or tire. In many ways, I am superior to my crewmates in measurable capacities. Yet I serve alongside them as equals because we have learned that capacity does not determine value. What you can do matters less than what you choose to do. Magneto turned back to the viewport, watching stars stream past as the Enterprise maintained warp speed. In my universe, that philosophy gets you killed. Power determines survival. Always has, always will. The strong protect their own, or they die. Then consider this, Picard said, standing to join him at the window. In your universe, you're locked in eternal conflict. Mutants versus humans, one side seeking dominance, the other seeking extinction of the threat. It's a war with no end, no possibility of peace, because it's predicated on the assumption that coexistence is impossible. But what if that assumption is wrong? I've spent decades testing that assumption, Captain. It fails every time. In your universe. Picard gestured at the stars beyond. Out here, we've encountered species far more powerful than humanity. The Q continuum, beings of pure energy who can manipulate reality with thoughts. The The Organians, pacifists who stopped a war by making weapons too hot to hold. The Metrons, who judge species by their capacity for mercy rather than violence. By your logic, these beings should dominate lesser species. Instead, they choose restraint. They choose to observe, to guide, to exist without conquest. Power does not mandate oppression. Those are aliens? Magneto countered. Not human. Humanity is different. Is it? Data interjected. You are human, Mr. Lehnsherr. Mutant, yes, but still Homo sapiens with genetic variations. Just as Vulcans have telepathic abilities, just as Betazoids sense emotions, just as I possess computational abilities far beyond organic capacity. We are all different, yet we coexist. The question is not whether coexistence is possible. It demonstrably is. The question is whether you believe it's worth attempting. Magneto's jaw tightened. His electromagnetic field pulsed, causing the lights to flicker momentarily. You want me to abandon everything I've fought for, to accept that I was wrong? No, Picard said firmly. I want you to consider that you were fighting the right battle in the wrong way. That protecting your people doesn't require dominating others. That there might be a path between Xavier's naive pacifism and your militant pragmatism. A Federation path, Magneto said with undisguised skepticism. A path where mutants and humans both survive. Where neither has to live in fear. Where power is recognized but not weaponized. Picard paused. You mentioned Xavier. What would he say if he could see you now? The question hit like a phaser blast. Magneto's hands clenched. And across the room, metal fixtures groaned under sudden pressure. For a moment, Picard thought he'd pushed too far, that the master of magnetism would lash out, would prove that violence was his only answer. Instead, Magneto's voice came out barely above a whisper. He'd say I lost my way, that I became what I fought against, that somewhere between the camps and the wars, Erik Lehnsherr died and only Magneto remained. He looked at Picard, and for the first time, the captain saw past the helmet, past the power, to the wounded man beneath. But Charles never understood. He never had to watch his mother die in front of him. He never had to claw survival from ash and bone. His dream is beautiful, Captain. It's also a fantasy that gets people killed. Then help us prove it's not, Picard urged. You have 3 days here. 3 days to examine a society that achieved what Xavier dreams of. We're not asking you to abandon your people or betray your principles. We're asking you to honestly evaluate whether your methods are the only way forward. Magneto turned back to the window, silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of decades of conflict. I'll evaluate. I'll observe. But understand this, Captain. I've been betrayed by hope before. By governments who promised protection while building weapons. By humans who smiled while sharpening knives. If your Federation is just another lie, if this tolerance is just a facade. His hand gestured, and the wine bottle lifted from the table reformed itself into a perfect metallic sphere, then shattered into microscopic particles that drifted like diamond dust. I'll know, and I'll respond accordingly. That's all I ask, Picard said. Honest evaluation. Data, please provide Mr. Lehnsherr with unrestricted access to our historical databases, cultural records, and current events logs. Let him see the Federation at its best and its worst. Let him judge for himself. Data nodded. I have already prepared a comprehensive archive. It includes the eugenics wars, World War III, first contact with Vulcans, the founding of the Federation, conflicts with the Klingon Empire, the Cardassian occupation of Bajor, the Dominion War, and approximately 14,000 additional historical events spanning 400 years. It will take considerable time to review. "I have 3 days," Magneto replied. "I'm a fast reader." As Picard and Data moved toward the door, the captain paused. "One more thing. Mr. Lehnsherr, tomorrow I'd like you to join me for a meeting with Counselor Troy and Commander LaForge. Geordi is our chief engineer, and he's blind. He sees through a visor that interprets electromagnetic radiation across multiple spectra. In many ways, he perceives reality similarly to how you sense magnetic fields. I think you'd find the conversation illuminating." Magneto raised an eyebrow. "A blind man who commands your engineering deck. Another example of Federation diversity? An example of recognizing that limitations can become strengths with the right perspective. Also," Picard smiled slightly, "he's particularly curious about how you manipulate magnetic fields at the subatomic level. Fair warning, Geordi will ask technical questions for hours if you let him." Despite himself, Magneto's lips quirked. A human who wants to understand rather than fear. Refreshing, if temporary. Then let us prove it's not temporary. Good night, Mr. Lehnsherr. As the door closed, Magneto stood alone in his quarters, surrounded by metal, by technology, by a ship he could destroy with a thought. He should feel powerful, dominant, in control. Instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Uncertainty. The Federation shouldn't work. A society built on equality, on tolerance, on the assumption that diverse beings could coexist peacefully. It defied everything he'd learned in decades of conflict. It was Xavier's dream made manifest, and Erik had spent so long explaining why that dream would fail that confronting its success left him unmoored. He turned back to the viewport, watching stars streak past at velocities that would have been impossible in his universe. The Enterprise traveled faster than light, broke barriers his world considered absolute, explored infinite possibilities among the cosmos. Perhaps, he thought reluctantly, he should extend the same openness to philosophical impossibilities. Perhaps coexistence wasn't the fantasy. Perhaps his certainty that it would fail was the limitation. But 3 days wasn't long, and trust, once broken as thoroughly as his had been, didn't rebuild easily. The Federation had 3 days to prove it was different. Erik Lehnsherr had survived decades by assuming the worst about humanity. He'd see if the 24th century could finally prove him wrong. Engineering, the beating heart of the Enterprise, where the warp core pulsed with barely contained antimatter reactions, where plasma conduits snaked through bulkheads like arteries carrying lifeblood, where the ship's very soul hummed with electromagnetic potential. Magneto stood on the upper catwalk, hands resting on the railing, eyes closed, simply feeling. Every circuit, every relay, every microscopic component sang to his senses like notes in a symphony. The magnetic containment fields holding antimatter stable. He could strengthen them or collapse them with a thought. The EPS conduits routing power throughout the ship, vulnerable to his will. The warp coils generating the faster-than-light field, intricate, beautiful, and entirely at his mercy. Incredible, isn't it? Magneto opened his eyes to find a man in a gold-shouldered uniform approaching, his eyes covered by a distinctive metallic visor that curved across his temples. The device pulsed with subtle electromagnetic signatures, feeding visual data directly into the optic nerve. Through technology, Magneto found simultaneously fascinating and disturbing. "Commander LaForge," Magneto acknowledged. "Captain Picard said you wanted to discuss electromagnetic theory." Geordi LaForge grinned. the expression transforming his face from professional engineer to enthusiastic scientist. "Oh, I want to do way more than discuss. I want to understand how you do what you do." The sensor readings from your arrival were off the charts. You were generating a localized magnetic field of over 2 Tesla, while manipulating objects at ranges exceeding 50 meters. That shouldn't be possible without a massive power generation equipment. Yet I do it. Magneto gestured, and a hyperspanner floated up from a nearby toolkit, rotating slowly in midair. In my universe, mutants are born with abilities that defy conventional science. My X gene allows me to sense and manipulate electromagnetic fields at quantum levels. I don't need equipment because I am the equipment. Geordi pulled out a tricorder, scanning with barely contained excitement. But how? I mean, the human brain generates about 0.001 Tesla naturally. You're producing fields 8 orders of magnitude stronger. The energy requirements alone should... He stopped, looking embarrassed. "Sorry, I get carried away. Starfleet Academy professors used to say I asked too many questions." "They said the same thing in the camps," Magneto replied quietly, then caught Geordi's confused expression. "My apologies. Different reference. In my world, asking questions in the wrong place got you killed." Geordi's enthusiasm dimmed, replaced by understanding. "Captain Picard briefed me on some of your history. I'm sorry for what you've been through. But here, questions are celebrated. That's kind of our whole deal, seeking out new knowledge, understanding how things work." He gestured at the warp core. "Like this baby, theoretically impossible by 20th century physics, but we asked enough questions to make it real." Magneto studied the engineer, sensing genuine curiosity rather than fear or manipulation. It was disarming. "You want to understand my abilities academically, not weaponize them?" "Well, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. Understanding how you manipulate magnetic fields at quantum levels could revolutionize our shield technology, improve our warp coil efficiency, maybe even lead to breakthroughs in transporter technology. But that's not why I'm curious." Geordi tapped his visor. "I see the world differently than most people. My visor interprets electromagnetic radiation from radio waves to ultraviolet. I see heat signatures, energy patterns, magnetic fields, things most humans can't perceive. When I look at you, Mr. Lehnsherr, I see something beautiful. You're like a living star, generating fields that dance and weave with every thought. It's art and physics combined." Magneto blinked, genuinely surprised. In his universe, humans looked at him and saw a threat, a weapon, a monster. This man looked at him and saw beauty. You're very different from the humans I've known. Maybe that's because I've spent my life being different too. Geordi moved to a console, pulling up technical schematics. "I was born blind. Back in the 24th century, we could fix that easily. Genetic therapy, ocular implants, cloned replacements. But my parents refused. They said my blindness wasn't something broken, just something different. They gave me the visor instead, and you know what? I'm glad. I see the universe in ways sighted people can't. I perceive reality at levels they'll never experience. Being different isn't a curse, Mr. Lehnsherr. It's a superpower." Spoken like someone who's never been hunted for his differences. Geordi's expression sobered. "You're right. I've never faced what you have. The Federation isn't perfect. We've got our share of prejudice, fear, closed-mindedness. But we're trying. And the fact that I'm standing here as chief engineer of the flagship, that Data serves as second officer, that Captain Picard commands a crew of 24 species, That matters. It means progress is possible. Before Magneto could respond, his senses flared. A distortion in the electromagnetic field surrounding the ship, subtle but present. His head snapped toward the warp core. Something's wrong. Geordi's hands flew across his console. What? All readings are normal. His eyes widened behind the visor. Wait, there's a fluctuation in the magnetic containment field. 0.003% variance. How did you sense that? I sense everything magnetic within several kilometers, Magneto replied, moving closer to the warp core. Your antimatter containment is failing, slowly but consistently. In approximately 43 minutes, the variance will reach critical levels. That's impossible. The containment fields have triple redundancy. But Geordi was already running diagnostics, and his expression shifted from skepticism to concern. He's right. There's a microscopic flaw in the primary magnetic bottle. The secondary systems would catch it, but... He looked up sharply. This is sabotage. Someone introduced a degradation algorithm into the containment protocols. If it reaches critical, we'd have a matter-antimatter breach that would vaporize the ship. Alarms began blaring across engineering. Officers rushed to stations. Lieutenant Carey's voice carried from below. Commander, I'm detecting... I see it, Geordi called back. All hands, containment breach protocols. We need to eject the warp core before... Magneto interrupted, raising both hands toward the core. I could stabilize it. What? You can't just... Geordi stopped as sensor readings transformed. The degrading magnetic field suddenly strengthened, not just holding, but reinforcing itself beyond designed parameters. The fluctuation ceased. The containment field locked into perfect stability. Magneto lowered his hands, electromagnetic aura fading. Your technology is impressive, Commander, but it's still technology. Still vulnerable to manipulation, sabotage, failure. My power is biological, intrinsic. It doesn't fail. Geordi stared at his console, then at Magneto, then back at the readings. You just manually adjusted a magnetic containment field designed to hold antimatter at temperatures exceeding 100 million degrees. Without equipment, without safety protocols, that's... He laughed in pure astonishment. That's the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And I've seen Q turn people into calamarain. Who sabotaged your systems? Magneto asked, already knowing the answer. Unknown. But given recent events, I'd bet on Romulan infiltration. Geordi opened a ship-wide channel. Bridge, this is engineering. We've had a containment breach attempt, now stabilized. Recommend full security sweep and... The ship shuddered. Not from internal systems, but from external impact. Red alert klaxons wailed. Picard's voice came through. All hands, battle stations. We're under attack. Magneto was already moving, flying up the catwalk toward the exit with Geordi sprinting behind him. They reached the bridge in seconds. Magneto simply passing through the turbo lift shaft like it was open air. Geordi taking the lift and arriving moments later. The view screen showed chaos. The Valdor uncloaked directly ahead, disruptors blazing. But they weren't firing at the Enterprise. They were firing at 3 smaller vessels, Maquis raiders by their configuration, that had emerged from the asteroid field surrounding them. Report, Picard commanded, gripping his chair as the Enterprise rocked from proximity blasts. The Maquis vessels are attacking the Romulan warbird, Worf growled from tactical. And the Romulans are returning fire. We're caught in the middle. Why would the Maquis attack a Romulan ship? Riker demanded. They wouldn't, Data replied, fingers dancing across his console. Captain, I'm detecting significant subspace distortions consistent with holographic projection. Those aren't Maquis vessels. They're Romulan ships disguised to appear as Maquis raiders. Magneto understood immediately. It's a setup. They're staging an attack to justify their presence. Or, his eyes narrowed as he sensed something else. Something wrong with the electromagnetic signatures. No, it's a distraction. From what? Picard asked. Magneto's hand shot out, and the bridge's internal sensors suddenly shrieked. A section of bulkhead near the ready room rippled, not holographically, but physically. A Romulan soldier materialized, weapon raised, not at the crew, but at a specific console near Data Station. "Intruder on the bridge," Worf roared, phaser coming up. But Magneto was faster. The Romulan's disruptor tore itself from his hands, crushed into a ball, and fired back into the ceiling. The soldier's uniform contained metallic threads. Magneto seized them, lifted the Romulan off his feet, and slammed him against the bulkhead, hard enough to stun, but not kill. He was targeting the navigational array, Data observed, moving to the console. Attempting to download our star charts, including Starfleet installation locations. Captain, there are 2 more intruders in engineering attempting to access our warp core specifications. Picard's jaw tightened. Security teams to engineering. Mr. Worf, hail the Valdor. End this charade now. The fake Maquis ships vanished as their holographic projections failed. The Valdore hung in space, disruptors still hot. And Tomalak appeared on the view screen looking frustratingly pleased with himself. Captain Picard, how unfortunate. It appears we've both been caught in a Maquis ambush. Naturally, the Romulan Star Empire was merely defending itself. Your operatives are aboard my ship, Picard said coldly. This is an act of war. Operatives? Captain, I have no idea what you mean. Perhaps you should check your internal sensors more carefully. The Maquis are known for boarding actions. Tomalak's smile was pure malice. Of course, if you'd simply handed over Mr. Lehnsherr as we requested, none of this unfortunate confusion would have occurred. Magneto stepped forward into Tomalak's view. So this is Romulan honor. Sabotage, infiltration, staged attacks. Tell me, Commander, in your empire of strength and honesty, is treachery taught at the Academy, or is it instinctual? Tomalak's expression flickered with irritation. Pragmatism, Mr. Lehnsherr. Something I thought you'd appreciate. The Federation wrapped you in pretty words while we're offering real solutions. Yes, we attempted to acquire their technical data. Yes, we staged a scenario to justify our actions. Because unlike Picard, we don't hide behind noble speeches. We take what we need. And what you needed, Magneto said softly, dangerously, was to prove that everyone is as dishonorable as you are. That even the Federation would weaponize me given the chance. That my only choice was between your cage and theirs. Precisely. And now that you've seen their response, combat stations, security protocols, suspicion, you understand. They fear you, just like humans always fear mutants. At least we're honest about what we want. Magneto raised his hand. Across the void, the Valdor's hull began to groan. A sound that shouldn't have been audible through vacuum, but was transmitted through electromagnetic manipulation of the Warbird's own communication systems. Lights flickered on the Romulan bridge. Consoles sparked. Let me be honest about what I want, Commander, Magneto said, voice like iron. I want you to leave. I want you to take your operatives, your lies, and your treachery back across the neutral zone. And I want you to remember this moment. The moment you realized that I'm not a prize to be claimed or a weapon to be wielded. I'm a person making a choice. and I choose to give the Federation their 3 days, intact, uninterrupted. The pressure on the Valdor intensified. Tomalak gripped his chair as systems failed around him. "You're making a mistake." "Perhaps." Magneto clenched his fist, and the Warbird's weapon systems tore themselves apart from the inside. Disruptors exploding in their mountings, torpedo launchers sealing shut as their metallic components fused. "But it's my mistake to make. Now leave before I decide that stopping with your weapons was mercy." The transmission cut. The Valdor engaged emergency warp, limping away with its cloak failing intermittently, damage too severe to hide. Within seconds, it vanished into subspace, running for the neutral zone. The bridge fell silent except for status reports from engineering. Geordi's voice came through. "Captain, the intruders are contained. No casualties. And sir, Mr. Lehnsherr's stabilization field is still holding. The warp core is operating at 103% efficiency. I've never seen anything like it." Picard turned to Magneto, who hovered near the view screen, electromagnetic aura fading. "You saved the ship, twice." "I protected myself," Magneto corrected. "If your warp core breached, I'd have died too." "You could have left," Troy said quietly. "You could have taken Tomalak's offer, or simply departed when the attack began. Instead, you stayed. You fought for us." Magneto landed, boots touching the deck with deliberate weight. "I stayed because I wanted to see how you'd respond. Whether you'd panic, whether you'd try to contain me, whether Tomalak was right about your fear." He looked at Picard. "You didn't lower your shields against me. You didn't deploy security. You trusted that I'd recognize the real threat. Because you're intelligent enough to distinguish between defense and aggression." Picard replied. "The Romulans underestimated you. They thought you'd react like a weapon, point and shoot at the nearest target. They didn't account for you being a strategist who'd see through their manipulation." "Or," Magneto said with a hint of dark humor, "they didn't account for me being petty enough to reject them simply because their treachery annoyed me." Riker barked a laugh despite the tension. "That works too." Data turned from his station. "Mr. Lehnsherr, I have completed preliminary analysis of the quantum anomaly that brought you here. The data is concerning. Would you be willing to discuss it?" Magneto nodded, then looked at Picard. "It seems I owe your Federation another day, Captain. They've earned it. But understand, I stabilized your warp core. I disabled the Romulan threat. Not because I've accepted your philosophy. I did it because the alternative was chaos that served no one, including me." "That's enough," Picard said simply. "Progress isn't measured in conversions, Mr. Lehnsherr. It's measured in choices. You chose cooperation over destruction. That's worth more than any declaration of allegiance." As Magneto followed Data toward the science lab, Riker leaned close to Picard. "He's warming up to us. Or he's calculating whether we're useful," Picard murmured back. "But either way, he's still here, still listening. That's more than Tomalak managed with all his schemes." On the view screen, the stars streamed past peacefully, as if the last hour's chaos had never occurred. But in the science lab, Data was about to show Magneto something that would change everything. Proof that returning home might destroy both universes, and force the master of magnetism to choose between saving his people and saving reality itself. The science lab was a cathedral of knowledge. Walls lined with sensor arrays, holographic projectors casting three-dimensional models of subspace geometry, and displays showing quantum calculations that would have seemed like magic to 20th century physicists. Data stood at the central console, manipulating the holographic interface with precise movements, while Magneto circled the projection, studying it with the intensity of someone whose life depended on understanding. The hologram showed two universes, represented as parallel membranes in higher dimensional space, and a ragged tear where they'd intersected. "This is the quantum anomaly that brought you here," Data explained, highlighting the rupture with golden light. It was not naturally occurring. Something in your universe and something in ours created a resonance cascade that temporarily aligned our dimensional frequencies. The result was a brief window, approximately 2.3 seconds, where matter could transfer between realities. Magneto leaned closer, electromagnetic fields causing the hologram to distort slightly. What caused the resonance? That is the concerning part. Data magnified the tear, revealing intricate patterns of energy. In your universe, there was a massive electromagnetic discharge. Your battle with the Sentinels, I presume. The power output was extraordinary, enough to briefly warp local space-time. Simultaneously, in our universe, the USS Relativity, a Starfleet temporal research vessel, was conducting quantum singularity experiments exactly 3 sectors from where you emerged. The two energy signatures created a harmonic that breached dimensional barriers. So, it was an accident, Magneto said. Random chance. Initially, yes. But the aftermath is not random. Data pulled up new data streams, equations flowing like waterfalls of light. The tear is not healing. It is stabilizing, crystallizing. If left unchecked, it will expand. Slowly at first, then exponentially. Within 72 hours, the breach will have grown large enough to allow mass transit between universes. Within 1 week, dimensional barriers in this region of space will collapse entirely. Magneto's eyes narrowed. Meaning? Meaning both universes would merge. Catastrophically, physical laws would conflict. Matter from your reality would interact destructively with matter from ours. The result would be a cascade failure affecting trillions of lives across multiple dimensions. Data met Magneto's gaze. "We must close the breach, Mr. Lehnsherr. And to do so, we need to recreate the exact conditions that opened it, including your electromagnetic signature. You need me to help seal the door I accidentally opened." "Correct." Magneto turned away, hands clasped behind his back. "And if I refuse? If I choose to keep the door open so I can return home?" Data tilted his head, processing the question without judgment. "Then you would condemn both universes to eventual destruction. Your people would die along with everyone else. It would be, statistically speaking, the worst possible outcome. Unless I returned before the collapse and warned them, gave them time to prepare, evacuate, something." "To where?" Data asked simply. "The dimensional collapse would spread across your entire universe within months. There is nowhere to evacuate, no safe harbor. Both realities would simply cease to be coherent." The weight of those words settled over the lab like a gravestone. Magneto stood motionless, processing implications that went beyond tactics or power into realms of cosmic consequence. In his universe, he'd been fighting for mutant survival. Here, he held the fate of infinite lives in his hands. "How certain are you of this analysis?" Magneto asked quietly. 97.3%. I have run the calculations 2,147 times, adjusting for quantum variables and uncertainty principles. The margin of error is minimal. Magneto laughed bitterly. "So, my choices are to abandon my people forever, or doom them along with everyone else. Some choice. There is a third option." Picard's voice came from the doorway. The captain entered, followed by Counselor Troy, both having been summoned by Data's preliminary findings. We close the breach as Data suggests, stabilizing both universes. Then we dedicate every resource the Federation possesses to finding another way to return you home safely. Research, experimentation, consultation with species who understand dimensional mechanics better than we do. It may take time, months, years, but we would not stop searching. Years? Magneto's electromagnetic field flared, causing lights to flicker. My people don't have years, Captain. They're dying now. Every day I'm trapped here is another day of genocide I can't prevent. Troy stepped forward, her empathic senses reading the storm of emotions radiating from Magneto. You're torn between your loyalty to your people and your recognition that destroying two universes doesn't save them. That conflict is tearing you apart. Of course it is. Magneto's voice rose, and across the lab, metal equipment rattled. Do you have any idea what it's like to carry the weight of your entire species' survival? To know that you're the only thing standing between your people and extinction? And now I'm here, powerless to help them, being told that even trying might kill everyone. You're not powerless, Picard said firmly. You have power most beings can only dream of. The question is how you use it. You can force open that breach, risk everything on the chance that you'll make it home before the collapse. Or I can give up, abandon them. Let them die while I'm safe in your paradise of tolerance. Magneto's eyes blazed. Is that what you'd do, Captain? If the Federation was being exterminated and you were trapped in another universe, would you prioritize theoretical cosmic safety over your people? Picard was quiet for a long moment, weighing honesty against diplomacy. I would want to save my people, desperately. But I would also recognize that saving them by destroying everything else isn't salvation. It's just delayed extinction. And yes, that recognition would feel like betrayal, like I'm failing everyone who trusted me to protect them. Then you understand why I can't simply accept this? I understand, Picard agreed. But understanding doesn't change physics. Data, show him the long-range projections. The hologram shifted, displaying both universes over time. Without intervention, the breach expanded like cancer, consuming reality in spreading waves of annihilation. Magneto watched civilizations flicker and die. Billions, trillions, infinite variations of life snuffed out because two energy signatures happened to align. In your universe, Data said softly, your people, your mutants, would have approximately 6 months before dimensional instability reached Earth. They would know something was wrong. Scientists would detect the anomalies, but they would have no solution, no escape. They would simply wait for reality to unravel. Magneto closed his eyes. Charles would try to use Cerebro to calm everyone telepathically, to give them peace in their final moments. It wouldn't work. Dimensional collapse would disrupt psionic frequencies. But he'd try anyway. That's who he is. And who are you? Troy asked gently. The man who would destroy everything out of loyalty? Or the man who would make the impossible choice to save everyone, even at the cost of those you love most? I don't know, Magneto admitted, and the raw honesty in those words was more frightening than any display of power. I've spent decades defining myself by my protection of mutant kind. It's been my purpose, my identity, my reason for existing. Take that away and what's left? Just Erik Lehnsherr, a man who couldn't save his mother, couldn't save his daughter, couldn't stop the machines that hunt his people. A man who failed. Or, Picard said, a man who faced impossible circumstances and survived, who built a movement from nothing, who inspired others to fight when surrender seemed inevitable. Your identity isn't defined by one decision, Mr. Lehnsherr. It's built across thousands of choices, and this is simply one more. Perhaps the most significant, but still just one. Data pulled up additional data. There may be hope for your universe, even without your presence. Based on the historical records you've shared, your world contains multiple powerful beings. The X-Men, the Avengers, other mutants like yourself. They have survived without you before. They may yet prevail. Or they may die because I wasn't there, Magneto countered. The Sentinels adapt. They learn. Without me to draw their attention, to destroy their prototypes, to force governments to negotiate. He stopped, unwilling to continue the thought. The lab fell silent except for the ambient hum of equipment. Magneto stood before the holographic projection of dimensional collapse, watching universes die in simulation, knowing that his choice would determine if the simulation became reality. How long do I have to decide? He asked finally. 48 hours, Data replied. After that, the breach will have stabilized to the point where recreating the closure conditions becomes exponentially more difficult. We would need to act within that window for maximum probability of success. 2 days to choose between everyone I've ever known and everyone I've never met. Magneto's laugh was hollow. The Romulans were right about one thing. Your Federation does specialize in impossible choices. We also specialize in finding solutions, Picard said. Mr. Lehnsherr, I give you my word. If you help us close this breach, I will personally ensure that every resource Starfleet possesses is dedicated to finding a safe way to return you home. Admiral Janeway escaped the Delta Quadrant, 70,000 light-years and decades of travel time in 7 years. The Enterprise has encountered beings who manipulate space and time like we manipulate matter. Dimensional travel is not impossible, just difficult. We will find a way. Admiral Janeway had hope, Magneto said quietly. I'm not sure I have that luxury anymore. Troy moved closer, close enough that Magneto could sense the iron in her blood, close enough to be vulnerable. You have more hope than you realize. You stayed when you could have left. You saved the ship when you could have let it die. You're still here, still listening, still considering options instead of simply taking what you want by force. That's hope, Mr. Lehnsherr. Hope that there might be a better way. Or it's cowardice, Magneto said. Fear of making the wrong choice, so I make no choice at all. Deliberation is not cowardice, Data observed. It is rationality. You are processing information and calculating outcomes. That is precisely what an intelligent being should do when faced with insufficient data and high stakes. Magneto looked at the android with something approaching respect. You're very different from the machines in my world, Commander. The Sentinels were built to hunt and kill. You were built to explore and understand. It's refreshing. I was built to exceed my programming, Data replied. Just as you exceed the limitations biology attempted to place on you. Perhaps that is what we have in common, the refusal to be defined by our origins. The door chimed. Worf's voice came through. Captain, we're receiving a transmission. Audio only, scrambled encryption. The sender claims to have information about Mr. Lehnsherr's universe. Picard and Magneto exchanged glances. Put it through. Static filled the lab, then resolved into a voice. Familiar, feminine, carrying authority edged with desperation. This is Colonel Carol Danvers, United States Air Force, transmitting from Earth, year 1995, coordinates classified. To anyone receiving this message, we've detected massive electromagnetic distortions consistent with dimensional breaches. Alien technology is involved. If someone is out there, if you can hear this, we need help. We're not equipped for this. People are dying. Please respond. Magneto's face went pale. That's impossible. I know Carol Danvers. She's Captain Marvel in my time, one of Earth's most powerful heroes. That message is from her past, before she got her powers. Data's fingers flew across his console. The transmission is coming through the quantum breach. It is not from your present timeline, but from your universe's past, approximately 31 years ago by your calendar. The breach is creating temporal echoes, allowing communication across time as well as dimensions. Then I can warn them, Magneto breathed. I can tell them what's coming, help them prepare. No, Picard said firmly. We cannot allow temporal contamination. Changing your universe's past could create paradoxes that what? Make things worse? Magneto's eyes blazed. Captain, you're asking me to close the only door home while listening to my people beg for help. How much more can you ask me to sacrifice? Before Picard could respond, the transmission continued. If anyone is receiving this, we're tracking the distortions to a facility in Nevada. Desert coordinates 37.2 deg, 116.8 degree Damu. Project Pegasus. If you have technology that can help, now would be a really good time to share it. The transmission cut to static. Magneto stood frozen, torn between past and present, between the people he could warn and the universes he could save. That facility, he said slowly, Project Pegasus. In my timeline, it became a nexus for cosmic threats. If someone could warn them, redirect their research, prevent some of their mistakes. He looked at Picard with desperate hope. Captain, what if the breach doesn't have to close? What if we stabilize it instead? Control it, use it, create a bridge between universes that's safe, managed, regulated. That is theoretically possible, Data admitted. However, it would require technology we do not currently possess. The energy requirements alone would exceed our capabilities by several orders of magnitude. But not impossible, Magneto pressed. Just difficult. Federation specialization, remember? Picard studied Magneto, recognizing the shift from resignation to desperate hope. It was dangerous. Hope made people take risks, made them ignore warnings, made them try impossible things. But it was also what separated the living from the dead, the fighters from the defeated. We'll investigate the possibility, Picard said carefully. But we continue preparing the breach closure as our primary option. Agreed? Magneto wanted to argue, wanted to demand guarantees and solutions. But Picard's compromise was more than the Romulans had offered, more than blind faith required. It was pragmatism tempered with possibility. Agreed, Magneto said finally. But Captain, if we find a way to stabilize that breach, if there's even a chance of controlled connection between our universes, I'm taking it. Even if it means defying Starfleet protocols. Then let's hope it doesn't come to that. Picard turned to Data. Begin analysis on breach stabilization theory. Consult with Lieutenant Barclay. His work with transporter technology might be applicable. And contact the Daystrom Institute. If anyone has research into controlled dimensional interfaces, they would. As they filed out of the lab, Magneto lingered, staring at the holographic breach. Through that tear in reality lay everyone he'd ever fought for. Everyone who depended on him. Everyone who believed Magneto would never abandon them. I won't give up on you, he whispered to the empty air. Charles always said I was too stubborn to accept defeat. Let's hope he was right. The hologram flickered, and for just a moment, Magneto thought he saw something in the breach. A face familiar and bearded, eyes sad behind ruby glasses. But when he looked again, there was only light and mathematics, the cold language of physics describing the death of universes. 10 forward. The Enterprise's social hub, where off-duty crew gathered to relax, where Gwinan dispensed drinks and wisdom in equal measure, where the boundaries of rank dissolved into shared humanity. Magneto sat alone at a corner table, untouched synthahol before him, watching the stars stream past through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd been there for 3 hours, silent and motionless, processing everything he'd learned. The door opened. Gwinan emerged from behind the bar, carrying a bottle, not replicated but genuine, and 2 glasses. She crossed the room with the unhurried grace of someone who'd seen centuries pass and learned patience. "That synthahol won't help," she said, sitting across from him without invitation. "But this might." She poured 2 glasses of El-Aurian brandy, amber liquid catching starlight. "Drink. It's real. It's old, and it's stronger than anything your universe probably has." Magneto studied her, the elaborate hats, the serene expression, the eyes that held depths he couldn't quite identify. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "Gwinan, I listen. Sometimes I talk. Mostly I pour drinks and watch people work through their problems." She slid a glass toward him. "You're working through a big one." "What gave it away? The brooding or the electromagnetic aura that's been disrupting your replicators?" "Both." She sipped her brandy. "But mostly it's the look in your eyes. I've seen it before, on refugees from the Borg, on survivors of the Dominion War, on anyone who's lost everything and doesn't know if they can keep going." Magneto took the glass, studying the liquid. "I haven't lost everything yet. That's the problem. I still have something to lose, which means I still have to make choices. The dimensional breach, your people versus everyone else's." Gwinan nodded. "Classic no-win scenario. Kirk got famous for not believing in those. He usually found a way to cheat. I'm not Kirk, and this isn't a simulation I can reprogram." "No," Gwinan agreed. "It's real, messy, complicated. That's what makes it a genuine choice rather than a test." She leaned back, regarding him with those ancient eyes. "You want to know what I think? Do I have a choice? Not really. I think you're afraid." Magneto's jaw tightened. "I've faced sentinels. I've fought gods. I've stared down genocide. Fear is irrelevant." "Fear is everything," Gwinan countered gently. "You're afraid that if you close that breach, you're admitting your fight is over. That you're giving up on the people who needed you most. You're afraid that without your crusade, you're just Erik Lehnsherr, and Erik died in Auschwitz. Only Magneto survived." The glass in Magneto's hand began to tremble, liquid rippling from electromagnetic disturbance. "You have no right." "I have every right. I'm El-Aurian. We're listeners, Mr. Lehnsherr. We hear the things people don't say, the truths they hide from themselves." Gwinan's voice remained calm, compassionate. "I was there when the Borg destroyed my world. 600 million of my people assimilated or killed in days. I survived. I escaped. And you know what the worst part was? The guilt. The knowledge that I lived while they died. That I was safe while they suffered. It ate at me for decades." Magneto looked up, meeting her gaze. "How did you move past it?" "Who says I did?" Gwinan smiled sadly. "Some wounds don't heal, Erik. They just become part of who you are. But I learned that surviving doesn't mean you've abandoned those who didn't. It means you carry them forward. You honor them by living well, by making choices they'd be proud of. And if I don't know what they'd want, If the only thing I'm certain of is that they needed me and I failed them, then you stop making it about them and start making it about you. Gwinan poured more brandy. What do you want, Erik Lehnsherr? Not Magneto the revolutionary, not the leader of the Brotherhood, not the protector of mutant kind. You. What do you want? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Magneto opened his mouth to answer, to give his standard response about mutant survival and superiority, about ending human oppression once and for all. But the words wouldn't come, because beneath the rhetoric, beneath the decades of war and ideology, he didn't know. He stopped, started again. I wanted my mother to live. I wanted Magda and Anya to be safe. I wanted Charles's dream to work, because if it worked, I wouldn't have to be the monster who ensures survival through fear. I wanted... His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I wanted to be more than a weapon. Then be more, Gwinan said simply. You're in a universe that values diversity, that celebrates differences, that's built on the principle that everyone has worth beyond their utility. You have a chance to be Erik again, not just Magneto. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it. Brave? Magneto laughed bitterly. You're calling abandoning my people bravery? I'm calling choosing life over revenge bravery, choosing hope over certainty, choosing to believe that maybe, just maybe, your people can survive without you long enough for you to find a way back. Gwinan leaned forward. Data said there might be a way to stabilize the breach. Picard promised to dedicate resources to finding solutions. The Federation has encountered reality-warping beings, traveled through time, crossed dimensional barriers before. If anyone can help you get home safely, it's them. But you have to give them the chance. And if they fail? If months turn into years, turn into decades, while my people die? Then you'll have done everything possible within the constraints of reality. Sometimes, Erik, the bravest thing we can do is accept that we're not gods. That we can't save everyone. That all we can control is our own choices. Gwinan's expression softened. You're Charles. You're a friend who believes in coexistence. What would he say right now? Magneto closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he let himself truly imagine Charles Xavier's voice, not filtered through anger or disappointment, but genuine, hopeful, believing in him despite everything. He'd say there's always another way, Magneto admitted. He'd say that destroying two universes to save one is the kind of zero-sum thinking that perpetuates conflict. He'd tell me that I'm better than my worst fears, that I have the strength to make the hard choice. He opened his eyes. And then he'd probably try to read my mind to make sure I was listening. Gwinan smiled. Sounds like a wise man. Maybe you should listen to him. He's not here. No, but you are. And you know what he'd say, which means part of you believes it. She stood, leaving the bottle. Keep the brandy. You're going to need it for the next 48 hours. And Erik, whatever you decide, make sure it's your choice, not Magneto's. Because I suspect Erik Lehnsherr is a better man than he gives himself credit for. She walked away, leaving Magneto alone with his thoughts and a bottle of El Arian brandy that tasted like regret and possibility in equal measure. The science lab, 6 hours later. Data worked alongside Lieutenant Reginald Barclay, both consumed by calculations that sprawled across multiple holographic displays. Geordi paced behind them, visor scanning energy readings, while his hands gestured enthusiastically through complicated explanations. It's theoretically possible, Barclay was saying, stuttering slightly in his excitement. If we create a subspace inversion field using modified tractor beam emitters, we could stabilize the quantum fluctuations. But the power requirements... He pulled up new equations. We'd need a sustained energy output of 10 to the 21st watts. That's more than the entire output of the warp core. Unless, Geordi interjected, we use Mr. Lehnsherr's electromagnetic capabilities to augment our systems. His natural field generation could provide the necessary harmonic resonance without draining ship's power. Data nodded. Positronic brain processing possibilities. Feasible. However, the stabilization would be temporary. To maintain a permanent dimensional bridge would require a stationary platform with dedicated power generation, essentially a space station positioned at the breach point. Which we don't have time to build, Geordi finished, frustration evident. Correct. We have 37 hours before the breach stabilizes beyond our ability to close it safely. Constructing a stabilization platform would require months. Data paused, golden eyes flickering as he processed new variables. However, there may be an alternative. He pulled up new data. Sensor readings from Deep Space Nine, the Federation space station positioned near the Bajoran wormhole. The prophets, non-linear beings inhabiting the Bajoran wormhole, have demonstrated the ability to manipulate space-time at quantum levels. Captain Sisko has established communication protocols with them. If we could convince them to assist, they don't interfere with linear matters, Geordi objected. Sisko's tried getting their help before. They only act when the wormhole itself is threatened. Perhaps, Barclay offered quietly, we could convince them that dimensional collapse threatens them too. I mean, if the barriers between universes collapse, wouldn't that affect their wormhole? Data tilted his head. An interesting hypothesis. The prophets exist outside normal space-time, but maintain a connection to our reality through the wormhole. Dimensional instability could theoretically disrupt their access point. He began composing a transmission. I will contact Captain Sisko immediately. The door opened. Magneto entered, brandy bottle in hand, half empty now, and a strange clarity in his eyes. I heard you've been working on alternatives. Show me. Geordi pulled up the holographic models. We think we can stabilize the breach temporarily. Hold it open while we study it, maybe create brief windows for communication or transit. But permanent stabilization requires resources we don't have in the time frame available. Magneto studied the projections with the intense focus of someone whose life depended on understanding. What about power generation? You said you need sustained energy. What if I provided it? Not temporarily, but continuously. You'd have to remain at the breach point indefinitely, Data replied. Acting as a living generator, maintaining the field without rest. The strain would be considerable, potentially fatal over extended periods. So, I'd be a battery? Magneto said flatly. Chained to a dimensional wound, keeping it stable while everyone else lives their lives. Essentially, yes, Geordi admitted. It's not a real solution. More like postponing the inevitable. Magneto laughed, but there was no humor in it. Story of my life. Postponing inevitabilities. He set the bottle down with a sharp clink. What about the Borg? Everyone froze. Barclay looked like he might faint. Geordi's expression shifted to alarm. Data, as always, remained analytical. Explain your reasoning, Data requested. The Borg assimilate technology. They adapt. They've conquered thousands of species and integrated their knowledge into the collective. Magneto's voice carried dangerous calculation. They must have encountered dimensional manipulation before. What if they have the technology to stabilize the breach? What if the solution isn't Federation science, but assimilated knowledge from species you've never even met? Absolutely not, Geordi said immediately. Contacting the Borg is suicide. They'd assimilate us, take the breach data, and probably destabilize it deliberately to gain access to your universe. More species to assimilate, more technology to integrate. Unless I made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Magneto's eyes gleamed with the kind of strategic ruthlessness that had made him legendary in his universe. The Borg seek perfection. I possess abilities they can't replicate through technology. Biological, electromagnetic manipulation at quantum levels. What if I offered myself for assimilation in exchange for stabilizing the breach? That's insane, Barclay breathed. That's pragmatic, Magneto countered. One life, mine, in exchange for solving the dimensional crisis and potentially gaining the knowledge to safely return me home. The Borg get a unique capability to integrate. I get what I need. You get assimilated, Geordi snapped. Stripped of free will, turned into a drone, your consciousness absorbed into a collective that won't honor any agreement. Erik, the Borg don't negotiate. They assimilate. Period. They negotiated with Captain Picard. They made deals with 7 of 9. They've shown willingness to bargain when it suits their goals. And betrayed those bargains the moment they had what they wanted, Data observed. Mr. Lehnsherr, I understand your desperation, but this course of action has a probability of success below 0.1%. It would most likely result in your assimilation, the destabilization of the breach, and the Borg gaining knowledge of your universe that they would exploit ruthlessly. Magneto slumped into a chair, the brandy and exhaustion finally catching up with him. Then what? What's the solution that doesn't require me sacrificing everything or becoming a monster or watching helplessly while universes die? No one had an answer. The lab fell silent, except for the hum of computers calculating equations that all led to the same conclusion. There were no good options. Finally, Data spoke. Captain Sisko has responded. The Prophets have agreed to consult, but they require you to come to them, Mr. Lehnsherr. They wish to understand the linear being who exists between realities. The Prophets exist outside time, Geordi explained. They might be able to see solutions we can't. Or at least understand the full implications of your choice. Magneto looked at the holographic breach, at the universes hanging in balance, at the impossible decisions that defined his existence. How long to reach Deep Space Nine? At maximum warp, 14 hours, Data replied. Then let's go. Magneto stood, electromagnetic aura flickering with renewed purpose. If beings outside time think they can judge my choices, let them try. Maybe they'll see something I've missed, or maybe they'll just confirm what I already know. That some choices have no right answers, only consequences we have to live with. As they filed out to brief Picard, Barclay whispered to Geordi, "Do you think the Prophets can actually help?" Geordi shrugged. "I think if anyone can make Erik Lehnsherr see beyond his own pain, it's beings who experience all of time simultaneously. They don't just know what he'll choose, they know what he could choose, what he should choose, and what every version of him across infinite possibilities has chosen. That sounds terrifying." "It should," Geordi replied. "Because when the Prophets talk, they don't just answer your questions. They make you face the truth about yourself. And something tells me Erik isn't ready for what they're going to show him." The Enterprise changed course, heading for the Bajoran sector at maximum warp. Behind them, the quantum breach pulsed like a wound in space, counting down the hours until reality itself would have to choose between healing and hemorrhaging. And somewhere in the space between universes, something ancient stirred. Not the Borg, not the Romulans, but something far older and far more dangerous. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. Deep Space Nine hung in space like a mechanical starfish. Its Cardassian architecture transformed into a symbol of Federation cooperation. The station orbited Bajor, positioned at the mouth of the Bajoran wormhole, a stable passage to the Gamma Quadrant, home to the Prophets, and one of the most strategically significant locations in known space. The Enterprise dropped out of warp, and Magneto stood on the bridge, sensing the station's massive metallic structure with the same clarity others used vision. Thousands of tons of duranium, tritanium, processing cores, power conduits, all vulnerable to his will. But what caught his attention was something else entirely. The wormhole itself. It wasn't open, not visibly, but he could sense it. A distortion in local space-time, a knot of gravitational and electromagnetic anomalies that shouldn't exist according to any physics he understood. It pulsed with energy that felt almost alive, almost aware. Fascinating, isn't it? Captain Benjamin Sisko stood at the transporter pad beside them, having beamed aboard with Commander Worf, his strategic operations officer and the Enterprise's former security chief. Sisko was tall, imposing, with the bearing of someone who'd fought wars and carried burdens that would have broken lesser men. I've been stationed here for 7 years, and the wormhole still surprises me. It's not natural, Magneto observed. Someone built it, or something created it deliberately. The Prophets, Sisko confirmed. They exist within the wormhole, outside linear time. They experience past, present, and future simultaneously. To them, our lives are like books they can read all at once, beginning, middle, and end existing together. And they want to meet me. They want to understand you. The Prophets are curious about beings who exist at intersections, crossroads of choice, moments where reality diverges based on decisions. Sisko studied Magneto with an intensity that suggested he saw more than just power. You're a living nexus point right now, Mr. Lehnsherr. Your choice affects 2 universes, infinite lives, uncountable futures. The Prophets find that interesting. Picard stepped forward. Captain Sisko, what can we expect? The Prophets have been cryptic in past encounters. Will they provide solutions or merely philosophical observations? Both. Neither. It's hard to predict. Sisko's expression held the weariness of someone who'd navigated non-linear conversations too many times. They'll show you truths, Mr. Lehnsherr. Whether those truths help is up to you to interpret. Fair warning, the Prophets don't care much for linear beings' comfort. They'll push you, challenge you, make you confront things you've been avoiding. I've confronted genocide, war, and humanity's capacity for evil, Magneto replied. What could they show me that's worse? Yourself, Sisko said simply. Without the armor, without the rhetoric. Just Erik Lehnsherr standing in front of beings who see every choice you've ever made and every choice you'll never make. That's what breaks most people. Magneto's jaw tightened, but he nodded. When do we leave? Now. The runabout Rio Grande is prepped and waiting. We'll take it into the wormhole. Sisko paused. Captain Picard, with your permission, I'd like Commander Data to accompany us. The Prophets have expressed curiosity about artificial life, and his perspective might be valuable. Agreed, Picard said, then looked at Magneto. Mr. Lehnsherr, I won't claim to understand what you're about to experience. But remember, whatever the Prophets show you, you're still the one who makes the final choice. Don't let them, or anyone, take that from you. Magneto met Picard's gaze, finding unexpected respect there. "Captain, if I don't return, if the prophets decide I'm too dangerous or too damaged, close the breach. Don't let my stubbornness doom both universes." "You'll return," Picard said with conviction. "I've learned to trust in people's capacity to surprise me." "You've already proven you're more than your reputation suggests." The runabout Rio Grande slipped away from Deep Space Nine, heading toward the coordinates where the wormhole would open. Magneto sat in the passenger compartment, Data across from him, while Cisco piloted from the forward station. The silence was heavy with anticipation. "Have you prepared yourself?" Data asked conversationally. "How does one prepare to meet beings that exist outside time?" One typically does not. However, understanding expectations may reduce psychological distress. Data tilted his head in that characteristic gesture. The prophets communicate through visions, not language. They will construct scenarios from your memories, your fears, your hopes. These constructs will feel real, indistinguishable from lived experience. The key is remembering that they are metaphors, lessons, not literal events. "Comforting," Magneto said dryly. "It is not meant to be. The prophets teach through discomfort. But Mr. Lehnsherr, may I offer personal observation?" Data waited for Magneto's nod. "In my experience with beings of greater capability, the prophets, various energy-based life forms, I have learned that raw power matters less than clarity of purpose. You possess extraordinary abilities. They possess extraordinary perception. The question is whether you possess extraordinary honesty. With them, with yourself." Before Magneto could respond, space ahead of them bloomed. The wormhole opened like a celestial flower, blue and white light spiraling into existence. A tunnel through space-time that defied physics and reason. The runabout shuddered as it crossed the threshold, and reality changed. Colors shifted through spectrums that shouldn't exist. Time felt thick, viscous, non-linear. Magneto's electromagnetic senses screamed with conflicting data. Particles moving backwards, energy patterns that violated causality, magnetic fields that existed in multiple states simultaneously. And then, silence. Magneto stood in a room he recognized instantly. His childhood home in Poland, before the Nazis came. Modest furniture, his mother's menorah on the mantel, the smell of challah bread baking. But the details were wrong. Too perfect, too precise. Memories didn't have this clarity. "This is not real," he said aloud. "Reality is a matter of perspective." The voice came from his mother, standing in the doorway with her gentle smile, exactly as he remembered her before the camps. But her eyes held something else, ancient awareness, non-linear consciousness, wearing his mother's face like a borrowed coat. "You're not her. We are what you need to understand the conversation." His mother, the prophet, moved into the room, gesturing at the familiar space. The linear being Erik Lehnsherr exists at an intersection. Two paths, two futures, both real, both terrible, both necessary. The room shifted. Suddenly they were in Auschwitz. The real Auschwitz, not sanitized memory, but the actual hell of mud and barbed wire and the smoke that never stopped rising from the crematoriums. Magneto felt his chest tighten, the old trauma clawing up from where he'd buried it beneath decades of rage. "I've lived this," he said through gritted teeth. "I don't need to relive it. You carry this." The prophet gestured, and Magneto saw himself, 12 years old, thin as wire, watching his mother being dragged toward the gas chamber while Nazi guards laughed. "This moment defines you," All choices flow from this pain. Then you understand why I fight. Why I can't let my people suffer the same fate. The scene shifted again. Now they stood in a burning building, a mutant shelter destroyed by human hatred. Bodies everywhere. Children. The Prophet wore a different face now. Anya, his daughter, frozen at the moment of her death decades ago. You fight to prevent this, Prophet Anya said. But observe. The scene rewound, played forward differently. Magneto saw himself arriving earlier, using his powers to stop the attackers, saving everyone. The mutants cheered. They called him hero, savior, protector. Then time accelerated. Those same mutants, emboldened by his protection, became aggressive, started attacking humans preemptively. Magneto watched himself justifying it. Defense, survival, necessary force. He watched the cycle escalate until nuclear weapons fell and mushroom clouds blossomed across the planet. Humans and mutants dying together in atomic fire. One path, Prophet Anya said. You save them. They become you. The cycle continues. The scene shifted again. Now Magneto stood in Xavier's mansion, watching himself argue with Charles, the same arguments they'd had 1,000 times. But this version of himself listened, chose peace, worked with the X-Men to build bridges instead of walls. He watched himself age peacefully, teaching young mutants control and restraint, watched human-mutant relations slowly improve. It was beautiful, perfect. Then he watched the Sentinels arrive anyway. Decades later, more advanced, unstoppable. Watched Xavier's peaceful mutants die because they'd never learned to fight, never developed the hard edge necessary for survival. Watched himself, old and broken, realize that peace had been a comfortable path to extinction. Another path, the Prophet said, wearing Charles Xavier's face now. Peace, coexistence, mutual destruction when the threat finally comes. So both paths lead to death, Magneto said bitterly. What's your point? Linear beings think in binary, peace or war, strength or submission, survival or extinction. But time is not linear. Futures are not predetermined. Every moment contains infinite possibilities. The Prophet gestured, and the scene exploded into a kaleidoscope. Thousands of variations. Infinite Magnetos making infinite choices, each cascading into different futures. Some where mutants ruled, some where humans triumphed, some where both species evolved past conflict, some where both destroyed each other, some where neither species mattered because cosmic threats erased them. Infinite variations of victory and defeat, hope and despair, playing out simultaneously. This is madness, Magneto breathed, overwhelmed by seeing too many futures at once. This is reality, the Prophet replied. You perceive time as a line, cause and effect, choice and consequence. We perceive time as it truly is, simultaneous, interconnected, infinite. Your choice about the breach exists in this context. Not two options, but uncountable options, each creating new branches, new realities. The visions collapse back into the childhood home. Magneto stood there, shaking, trying to process nonlinear time with a brain designed for sequence and causality. Why show me this? He demanded. If every choice splits into infinite futures, then nothing matters. Every decision is both right and wrong simultaneously. No, said a new voice. Data stood in the doorway, but his eyes held the same ancient awareness. Every decision matters because you only experience one timeline. You cannot perceive infinite branches, only the singular path you walk. The question is not which choice leads to the best future. There is no best in infinite possibility. The question is which choice you can live with. The linear being fears making the wrong choice, Prophet Data continued. But wrong implies objective morality across infinite timelines. There is no wrong. There is only choice and consequence. You choose. Reality responds. You live with the result. That is existence. Then what am I supposed to do? Magneto's voice cracked with frustration and exhaustion. Close the breach and abandon my people? Keep it open and risk destroying everything? Sacrifice myself to stabilize it? Every option leads to suffering. Yes, all three prophets said simultaneously, their voices overlapping. That is the nature of significant choice. Comfort is not an option, only which suffering you accept. The room transformed one final time. Magneto stood at the quantum breach itself, seeing it not through sensors, but directly. A wound in space-time bleeding possibilities. On one side, his universe. On the other, the Federation. And in between, himself, holding both realities in balance. You stand between, the prophets said, unified now in a chorus of voices that came from everywhere and nowhere. The anomaly, the bridge, the choice. Close the wound and heal both universes at the cost of connection. Stabilize the wound and maintain connection at the cost of constant effort. Force the wound open and risk both universes at the chance of return. These are not the only options, but they are the ones you perceive. Then show me the others, Magneto shouted at the infinite space. We cannot. You are linear. You must discover them through time, through experience, through the painful process of living forward into unknown futures. We can only show you what you've lived and what you might live. The space between, the moment of choice, that is yours alone. The wormhole began to collapse around them. Reality reasserted itself, dragging Magneto back toward linear time, toward sequential existence, toward the universe where choices had to be made without seeing all possible outcomes. The last thing he heard was the prophet's final message. The breach closes in 20 hours. Whatever you choose, Erik Lehnsherr, choose with open eyes. Not as Magneto, who fights from old wounds. Not as the survivor, who fears new losses. As yourself, complex, flawed, capable of both terrible violence and unexpected grace. That being makes better choices than either extreme. The runabout emerged from the wormhole. Magneto gasped, falling to his knees, brain struggling to reintegrate with linear time after experiencing non-linear existence. Data caught him, providing physical support while his positronic brain processed what they'd witnessed. Are you functional? Data asked with concern that seemed genuine despite his synthetic nature. I saw everything, all possibilities, all futures. I saw myself win and lose, save and doom, become hero and monster in infinite variations. Magneto looked up at Data with haunted eyes. How does anyone make choices knowing that every decision creates worlds? By accepting that we can only live in one world at a time, Data replied gently. The prophet's gift is perspective. Their curse is paralysis. Linear beings have an advantage. We can act without seeing all consequences. That is not limitation. That is freedom. Cisco emerged from the cockpit, face drawn. They showed you the hard truth, didn't they? That there are no perfect choices, only honest ones. They showed me that I'm trapped, Magneto said bitterly. Any choice I make dooms someone. I'm the one forced to decide who suffers. No, Cisco corrected, voice hard with experience. They showed you that you've always been trapped by thinking you have to be the one who decides everything. Erik, the universe doesn't revolve around your choices. You're important, yes, Your decision matters, but you're not solely responsible for every outcome. Other beings have agency too. Your people, the Federation, the Romulans, even the Borg. You're one variable in an infinite equation, not the entire equation. Magneto absorbed this, feeling the weight of cosmic responsibility lighten incrementally. It wasn't all on him. It never had been. That was the hubris of power, believing that capability meant sole culpability. 20 hours, he said finally. Then the breach stabilizes, and the choice is made for me. Then we use those 20 hours, Sisko replied, setting course back to Deep Space Nine. Data, did you record the Prophet's visions? Affirmative, though I suspect much of what occurred was psychic rather than physical, and thus may not translate to sensor data. But you saw things, learned things, maybe something that suggests solutions we haven't considered. As the runabout accelerated back toward the station, Magneto stood at the viewport, watching the wormhole collapse behind them. The prophets had given him perspective, clarity, and the terrifying knowledge that whatever he chose would ripple across realities in ways he couldn't predict or control. But they'd also given him something else. Permission to be wrong. Permission to make the best choice he could with limited information. Permission to be human, fallible, uncertain. Magneto, master of magnetism, had always been certain. That certainty had made him powerful, dangerous, effective. Erik Lehnsherr, Holocaust survivor and flawed man, understood uncertainty. And perhaps, he thought, uncertain choices made with open eyes were more honest than certain choices made from fear. The Enterprise waited ahead. Picard would want a report. Geordi and Data would want technical analysis. The bridge crew would want to know what the Prophet said. But Magneto knew the only thing that truly mattered. In 20 hours, he would make a choice. Not the right choice. There was no such thing. Just his choice, made with the full weight of its consequences acknowledged. And somehow, that felt like enough. 16 hours remaining. The Enterprise's conference room had become a war room. Holographic displays showing the quantum breach from every angle, mathematical models predicting cascade failures, and contingency plans stacked like corpses. Picard sat at the head of the table, Riker to his right, Data and Geordi working furiously at the science station. Magneto stood apart, arms crossed, electromagnetic aura causing the lights to flicker with each surge of emotion. We've exhausted every option, Geordi said, frustration evident in his voice. Controlled stabilization requires technology we don't have. Temporal solutions risk paradoxes. The prophets offered philosophy but no practical intervention. We're back to the original choice. Close it or let it expand. There has to be another way, Riker insisted. We're Starfleet. We don't accept no-win scenarios. Sometimes, Magneto said quietly, the universe doesn't care what Starfleet accepts. The door opened. Counselor Troi entered, her face pale, empathic senses clearly overwhelmed. Captain, we're receiving distress calls. Multiple ships across 3 sectors reporting spatial distortions. The breach is affecting subspace in ways we didn't predict. It's not just expanding, it's destabilizing the entire region. Data's fingers flew across his console. Confirmed. The quantum breach is creating subspace fractures. Within 6 hours, warp travel in this sector will become impossible. Within 12 hours, the fractures will begin to merge. Captain, if we don't act now, we won't just lose 2 universes. We'll lose this entire region of space, approximately 40 inhabited systems. The room fell silent. The stakes had just multiplied exponentially. How do we close it? Picard asked, his voice carrying the weight of command. Specifically, what's required? Data pulled up the technical specifications. We must recreate the exact conditions that opened the breach, then reverse the energy flow. This requires Mr. Lehnsherr to generate an electromagnetic pulse of precise frequency and amplitude, while the Enterprise directs a focused anti-proton beam into the breach's center. The combined energy will collapse the dimensional intersection. And me? Magneto asked. What happens to me? Data met his gaze with characteristic honesty. The energy discharge will be substantial. Your electromagnetic systems will be overtaxed. At minimum, you will be rendered unconscious for several days. At maximum, he paused, calculating probabilities. There is a 34.7% chance the strain will cause permanent neural damage, a 12.3% chance of fatality. So, I might die closing a door I accidentally opened. Yes. Magneto laughed, sharp, bitter, but somehow cleansing. Poetic. The man who spent his life opening doors to mutant liberation dies closing a door to save everyone else. Mr. Lehnsherr, Picard began, but Magneto raised a hand. I'm not refusing, Captain. I'm just appreciating the irony. He moved to the viewport, staring at the stars. In my universe, I was always the radical, the extremist, the one willing to do terrible things for the right reasons. And here, in yours, I'm being asked to make the ultimate sacrifice for people I don't know, in a universe that isn't mine, to save a future I won't be part of. You'd be part of it, Troy said softly. If we succeed. If we close the breach and you survive, you'd still be here. We'd still help you find a way home. Would you? Magneto turned, and the raw vulnerability in his expression was more frightening than any display of power. Be honest, counselor. If I survive this, if I'm damaged or weakened, will the Federation really dedicate resources to helping one problematic refugee? Or will I become a file in some database, a problem to be managed rather than solved? Picard stood, moving to face Magneto directly. You have my word. As captain of this vessel, as a representative of Starfleet, as a man who believes that one person's dignity matters as much as millions, we will not abandon you. We will find a way to return you home safely, even if it takes years. Even if it means challenging regulations. Even if it requires me to call in every favor I've accumulated across 4 decades of service. Why? Magneto demanded. Why should you care about one man when billions are at stake? Because that's what separates us from those who would treat you as a weapon or a threat. Picard replied. We care about the billions and the individual simultaneously. It's not efficient, it's not logical, but it's human. And humanity, at its best, refuses to calculate the value of lives, like accountants balancing books. Magneto studied Picard's face, searching for deception and finding only stubborn idealism tempered by pragmatic experience. It was the same expression Charles Xavier wore when insisting that the world could be better, should be better, would be better, if enough people simply tried. Charles would like you, Magneto said finally. You're as naive as he is, and somehow, just like him, you make that naivety seem almost reasonable. Then do this for Charles, Troy suggested. Not for the Federation, not for the billions you don't know. Do it because your friend would ask you to. Because somewhere in your universe, he's still believing in the dream. Don't prove him wrong. Before Magneto could respond, alarms shrieked across the ship. Worf's voice boomed through the comm. Captain, to the bridge. We're detecting multiple warp signatures. Romulan, Borg, and something else. Unknown configuration, but massive power readings. The conference room emptied in seconds. They reached the bridge to find the view screen displaying a nightmare. The Valdor had returned, but not alone. 2 Borg cubes hung in formation behind it, their dark hulls bristling with technology. And between them, something that made even the Borg look primitive. A vessel that seemed to fold space around itself, its hull shifting through dimensions like oil on water. "Identify that ship," Picard commanded. "Unable," Data reported. "Its quantum signature is..." "Captain, it's from Mr. Lehnsherr's universe. It crossed through the breach before spatial distortions made transit impossible." Magneto moved to the view screen, electromagnetic senses screaming danger. The vessel's design was familiar. Too familiar. "That's a Sentinel mothership. Advanced model, probably Mark X or higher. They're autonomous hunter-killer platforms designed to track and eliminate mutants across continents." His voice hardened. "If one followed me through the breach, it means they've detected mutant energy signatures in this universe. They've come to finish the job." Tomalak's face appeared on screen, flanked by Borg tactical displays and the cold mechanical intelligence of the Sentinel ship. "Captain Picard, Mr. Lehnsherr, allow me to present a coalition of interested parties. The Romulan Star Empire wants access to your technology. The Borg want to assimilate the master of magnetism. And this fascinating machine wants to eliminate him. We've formed a temporary alliance. The breach stays open, dimensional barriers collapse, and each party takes what they want from the resulting chaos. You've allied with the Borg." Picard's voice carried disbelief and disgust. "They'll assimilate you the moment you're no longer useful." "A risk," Tomalak admitted, "but preferable to watching the Federation claim exclusive access to dimensional technology. Besides, the Borg have agreed to very specific terms. They assimilate Mr. Lehnsherr. We acquire the breach technology. The Sentinel machine eliminates potential mutant contamination. Everyone profits." The Borg spoke, thousands of voices in unison, the sound of death given voice. "We are the Borg. Mr. Erik Lehnsherr, you will be assimilated. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile." And beneath it all, the Sentinel's voice. Cold, mechanical, utterly without mercy. "Mutant designation, Magneto. Threat level, Omega. Termination protocol engaged. All mutant genetic signatures will be eliminated. This universe will be purified." Magneto's hands clenched. Around the Enterprise, metal groaned, not from his rage, but from his fear. These were the nightmares that had chased him for decades. The Sentinels that had murdered countless mutants. The promise of endless war now spread across 2 universes. "They're not here to negotiate," he said. "The Sentinels don't negotiate. They hunt, they kill, they adapt. If they've allied with the Borg, both species will share technology. Adaptive Sentinels with Borg assimilation capabilities." He looked at Picard with desperate urgency. "Captain, this changes everything. We can't let them access the breach. If they cross into my universe with Borg technology, red alert," Picard commanded. "All hands to battle stations. Mr. Worf, maximum shields. Load all torpedo bays." "Captain," Data interjected, "the Borg cubes are each capable of destroying the Enterprise. The Romulan warbird is heavily armed. The Sentinel vessel's capabilities are unknown. Our probability of victory in direct combat is 3.4%. "Then we don't fight directly," Riker said, tactical mind already working angles. "Mr. Lehnsherr, can you disable their ships?" "Not all simultaneously. And the Sentinel is specifically designed to resist electromagnetic manipulation. It adapts." Magneto's mind raced through possibilities, each more desperate than the last. "But I can hurt them. The Borg cubes are metal. The warbird is vulnerable. The Sentinel." He paused, An idea forming. Terrible, brilliant, suicidal. The Sentinel runs on Stark Tech-derived arc reactor technology, magnetic containment. If I disrupted it while simultaneously destabilizing the quantum breach, the resulting energy cascade would destroy all 4 ships, including the Enterprise, Data noted. Not if you were far enough away. Maximum warp, shields at full, maybe you'd survive the shock wave. Magneto turned to face them all. Picard, Riker, Data, Troy, Worf. The crew that had given him 3 days to decide who he was. I'd be at the epicenter. I wouldn't survive. But the breach would collapse. Your universe would be safe. Mine would be sealed, but intact. Absolutely not, Picard said immediately. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Magneto's voice rose, electromagnetic field surging until every console on the bridge sparked. Don't you see? This is it. This is the moment where I get to choose, not between my people and yours, not between survival and sacrifice, but between the man I've been, Magneto, who would kill billions to save his species, and the man I could be, Erik Lehnsherr, who saves everyone even though it costs him everything. The Borg cubes began advancing. Tomalak's smirk widened. The Sentinel powered up weapons designed to obliterate mutants at molecular levels. You have 30 seconds to surrender, the Coalition announced, or we open fire and take what we want from your wreckage. Magneto looked at Picard one final time. Tell Charles I finally understood. Tell him his dream was right, just early. Tell him. His voice broke. Tell him I'm sorry it took me this long to believe. Before anyone could stop him, Magneto's electromagnetic field exploded outward. The view screen shattered. Force fields failed. He flew through the broken, transparent aluminum into space, surrounded by his power, arms outstretched like a martyr ascending. Magneto, no, Troy screamed. But he was already gone. In space, surrounded by enemy vessels and the pulsing wound of the quantum breach, Erik Lehnsherr embraced everything he'd ever been. The survivor, the revolutionary, the monster, the hero, the man who'd spent decades fighting to prove that mutants deserved to exist. And now, in the end, proving it by saving the species that had hunted him. His power reached out, touching the Borg cubes. Nanoprobes screamed as he ripped them from their configurations. Hulls crumpled like paper. The Valdor's systems exploded from internal electromagnetic pressure. The Sentinel, adaptive, evolving, learning, tried to counter his assault. But Magneto wasn't trying to destroy it through conventional means. He was using it as a catalyst. His electromagnetic field resonated with the Sentinel's arc reactor, forcing it into overload. Simultaneously, he reached into the quantum breach itself, manipulating its magnetic components, destabilizing the delicate balance that kept it from collapsing or exploding. Energy built, antimatter reactions cascading out of control, dimensional barriers screaming under impossible strain. The Borg tried to adapt. The Romulans tried to retreat. The Sentinel tried to compensate. None of it mattered. Magneto looked back at the Enterprise one final time, seeing the ship accelerate to maximum warp, shields at full, crew scrambling to survive the coming storm. He saw Picard on the bridge, face twisted with helpless fury at losing someone he'd tried to save. Saw Data calculating the energy release. Saw Troy weeping for a man she'd barely known but had understood completely. And he smiled. For the first time in decades, since before the camps, before the hatred, before Magneto consumed Erik, he smiled with genuine peace. Charles, he whispered to the void, I finally get it. Power without compassion is just destruction. But compassion without power. He clenched his fists, drawing every iota of electromagnetic force in the region into himself, becoming a living star of pure energy. Is just good intentions. You need both. Always both. The quantum breach collapsed. The Sentinel exploded. The Borg cubes imploded. The Valdori disintegrated. And at the center of it all, Erik Lehnsherr, Magneto, master of magnetism, survivor of Auschwitz, protector of mutant kind, burned like a supernova, sealing dimensional barriers with his life as the price. The Enterprise, thrown by the shockwave, tumbled through space at warp, barely holding together. When they finally stabilized and looked back, there was nothing. No breach, no enemy ships, no trace of the man who'd saved 2 universes at the cost of his own existence. On the bridge, silence. Then Worf's quiet report. All hostile vessels destroyed. The quantum breach is closed. Subspace readings normalizing. We survived. Did he? Troy asked through tears, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it denied. Data scanned, rescanned, adjusted every sensor to maximum sensitivity. I am detecting no life signs, no electromagnetic signatures consistent with Mr. Lehnsherr. The energy release was equivalent to a photon torpedo detonation at point-blank range. No biological organism could have survived. Picard sat heavily in his command chair, suddenly looking every year of his age. He made his choice, the hardest one, the bravest one. He looked at his crew, his family, and saw his own grief reflected back. Set course for Deep Space Nine. We'll need to file reports, debrief with Starfleet, explain how we lost someone we promised to protect. Captain. Geordi's voice came through from engineering, cautious but carrying something that might have been hope. I'm detecting residual electromagnetic patterns in the sector. They're faint, dispersed, but they're there. It's like fragments, quantum echoes of Magneto's energy signature. Everyone on the bridge turned to stare at the comm. What does that mean? Riker demanded. I don't know, Geordi admitted. Maybe nothing. Maybe his power was so intense it left imprints on local space-time. Or maybe... He hesitated. Maybe when you're a being that manipulates fundamental forces of nature, death works differently. I'd need time to analyze it. Weeks, probably. But there's something there. Picard stood, hope rekindling in his chest. Then we analyze. We study. We don't stop until we understand what happened to him. Mr. Data, coordinate with Commander LaForge. Full sensor analysis of the entire sector. If there's any chance Erik Lehnsherr survived, we find him. Data finished. Understood, sir. As the Enterprise limped toward Deep Space Nine, the crew carried dual weights. Grief for a sacrifice that might have been, and desperate hope that somehow, impossibly, the master of magnetism had found a way to cheat death itself. In the space where the breach had been, invisible to sensors but real nonetheless, quantum fragments drifted. Electromagnetic echoes, pieces of consciousness scattered across dimensional boundaries. Not dead, not alive. Something in between. And in that between space, Erik Lehnsherr dreamed of Poland before the war, of his mother's smile, of Charles's eternal optimism, and of a federation that had believed he was more than his worst moments. The multiverse held its breath, waiting to see if those fragments would fade into nothing, or if will alone could reassemble what physics had torn apart. The memorial service was held in 10 Forward. It was a simple affair. No grand Starfleet ceremony, just the Enterprise crew gathering to honor someone who had been among them for less than a week, but who had changed everything. Captain Picard stood before the viewport, the repaired transparent aluminum framing a peaceful starfield where a war had just been fought. The room was full, but quiet. There was no body to commit to space, no recorded logs from a fallen officer, just an absence where a force of nature had been. We gathered to remember a man who was not one of us. Picard began, his voice carrying through the silent room. He was not Starfleet. He was not from our time or our universe. But in the short time Erik Lehnsherr was with us, he reminded us of what our principles truly mean. He turned, facing his crew. Geordi LaForge's visor was dark, his head bowed. Data stood with perfect stillness, his golden eyes reflecting the somber light. Deanna Troy's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed but dry now. Commander Riker's jaw was set, his usual easy confidence replaced by a quiet respect. He was a being of immense power. But what I will remember is not that power. Picard continued. I will remember the man who questioned everything we hold dear, who looked at our paradise and saw the ghosts of his own pain, who forced us to defend our ideals not with speeches, but with actions. He did not believe in our Federation because we told him to. He demanded we prove it. Picard paused, looking down at the small table beside him. On it sat two objects, the crushed remains of the tricorder from the shuttle bay, now carefully shaped into a perfect, tiny sphere, and a bottle of 2346 Chateau Picard, unopened. He chose, in the end, to protect our universe and his own. He made the sacrifice he believed his friend Charles Xavier would have asked of him, the sacrifice of peace over victory, of compassion over survival. Picard's voice grew firmer. We will not let that choice be in vain. The quantum breach is sealed. The Romulan and Borg incursion has been repelled. But our work is not done. He looked directly at Data and Geordi. Commander LaForge has detected residual electromagnetic signatures at the epicenter of the blast. We do not yet understand what they represent. It may be nothing but an energy echo. It may be something more. We will dedicate every resource, call upon every scientific mind in the Federation, and we will not rest until we have an answer. The crew exchanged glances. Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered in the room. We also made a promise, Picard said. We promised to find a way to return him home if it was possible. That promise stands. Our mission now is not just to explore strange new worlds, but to explore the possibility that a man who gave everything for two universes might still, somehow, be saved. The service ended quietly. Crew members filed out, many touching the polished metal sphere on the table as they passed, a makeshift relic for a man who left no others. Deep Space Nine. 2 weeks later, Captain Sisko's office overlooked the promenade, the bustling heart of the station, a stark contrast to the grim meeting within. Picard stood before Sisko's desk, Data and Geordi beside him. A stack of pads between them. The findings are inconclusive, Geordi said, handing a pad to Sisko. The energy patterns are stable. They're not dissipating like normal electromagnetic residue. They're interacting, forming complex, low-level patterns that resemble neural activity, but on a quantum scale. Sisko scanned the data, his expression unreadable. The prophets have been silent on the matter, but Commander Dax has a theory. He gestured to the Trill's science officer standing by the window. Jadzia Dax stepped forward, her symbiont's centuries of knowledge lending weight to her words. We're dealing with a consciousness that expressed itself through the manipulation of a fundamental force. When Magneto channeled that catastrophic energy, he didn't just release it, he became it. His mind, his self, may have been imprinted onto the local electromagnetic fabric of space-time. He's not in our dimension, and he's not in his. He's in the boundary, a state of quantum potential. Can he be retrieved? Picard asked, the core question hanging in the air. Retrieved? Dax smiled faintly. That implies he's somewhere we can reach. He's not. But reconstituted? Perhaps. If his consciousness is preserved as a pattern in the EM field, and if we can find a way to provide a matrix for that pattern to coalesce around, it's theoretically possible. It would require technology we don't have, an understanding of consciousness we barely grasp. The Borg might have had it, Data observed. Their studies of assimilation involve preserving neural patterns. Their data could be invaluable. The Borg cube wreckage is scattered across 3 sectors, Sisko said, rubbing his temple. And Starfleet Command is already having fits about this entire incident. They want the Magneto file closed and buried. A dimensional incursion, a Romulan treaty violation, a Borg engagement, and the destruction of a potentially universe-ending anomaly, all caused by one man? That's the kind of thing that gives admirals ulcers. Then we don't ask for permission, Picard stated. Sisko looked up, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was the kind of reckless, principled statement he appreciated. We use the resources we have, Sisko agreed. The Enterprise needs repairs, but Deep Space Nine has labs. Commander Dax, you'll lead the theoretical research. Commander LaForge, you and Data will handle the technical and electromagnetic analysis. I'll handle Starfleet. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. But understand this. We are operating on the edge of science, ethics, and regulation. We are trying to resurrect a being of incalculable power who died to save us. The consequences of failure or success are unforeseeable. We understand, Picard said, but we owe him the attempt. The wreckage of the Sentinel. 1 month later, the salvage tug worked in silence, its tractors carefully pulling twisted, exotic alloys from the debris field. The Sentinel mothership was a ruin, but a fascinating one. Geordi, floating in his EV suit alongside Data, guided a particularly large fragment into the Enterprise's cargo bay. Fascinating. Data's voice came through the comm. The alloy is a polymorphic crystalline metal. It was attempting to adapt to Mr. Lehnsherr's attack when it was destroyed. Its last structural configuration shows magnetic resonance frequencies that match his unique signature. It learned from him, Geordi said, his visor painting the wreckage in a tapestry of energy residue. Right up until it blew apart, it was trying to counter his powers. That means it recorded them. Data, if we can reconstruct its sensor logs from the moment of overload. We may have a perfect recording of his electromagnetic fingerprint at the moment of dissolution. Data finished. A blueprint. Back in the lab, the data was staggering. The Sentinel's final milliseconds of operation provided a map, not of a physical form, but of a consciousness expressed as a complex, living electromagnetic field. It's like a symphony, Geordi whispered, watching the patterns flow across the holographic display. Every thought, every memory, every ounce of his will, translated into variations in magnetic frequency and amplitude. This is him. This is Erik. The pattern is degrading, however, Data noted. At its current rate, the coherent data will be lost within 6 months. We require a matrix to stabilize it. Dax entered, reviewing the new data. A matrix. Something that can hold an electromagnetic pattern. Something receptive. Her eyes lit up. The prophets called him the bridge. What if we need to build an actual bridge? Not to another dimension, but to a state of being. Explain, Picard said. We can't pull him back into a physical body. We don't have one, and his original is gone. But what if we could create a vessel? A technological medium designed to receive and stabilize this specific pattern. Not an imitation body, but a conduit for his consciousness to interact with our reality again. A new kind of life form, Data said. Part quantum pattern, part technology. Like myself, but born from energy rather than positronics. The plan was insane. It bordered on hubris. It was the kind of project that had spawned legends and nightmares across the galaxy. And they had 6 months. Stardate 539007 Poinjalsen, 5 months later. Utopia Planitia Fleet Yards, Mars. The chamber was shielded by 20 layers of duranium and conditioned with enough EM dampeners to neutralize a solar flare. In its center, suspended in a zero-G field, was the Matrix. It was not a body. It was a sphere of interwoven technologies. Borg neural transceivers, salvaged from the wreckage and meticulously purged of collective programming. Vulcan psionic resonators, tuned to frequencies of consciousness. Romulan quantum state stabilizers, borrowed from a covert Section 31 cache with Cisco's less-than-legal assistance. And at its core, a fragment of the Sentinel's adaptive crystal, now serving as the primary resonator for the pattern they called Erik Lehnsherr. Geordi, Data, Dax, and Picard watched from the observation deck. The air hummed with barely contained power. The pattern is stable in the buffer, Data reported. All systems are nominal. The transfer sequence is ready. Picard took a deep breath. They were about to attempt to catch a ghost in a machine of their own making. Proceed. Geordi initiated the sequence. Energy flowed into the matrix. The sphere began to glow, not with light, but with a deep, pulsing indigo, the color of Magneto's power. The electromagnetic readings spiked, matching the patterns from the Sentinel's final scan. For a long moment, nothing. Then the sphere shivered. The glow intensified, forming filaments of energy that arced within the containment field, sketching shapes. A helmet, a cape, the suggestion of a human form made of crackling force. A voice filled the chamber, not through speakers, but through the very metal of the station, vibrating in their bones. It was layered, resonant, echoing with power and a profound, weary sadness. I dreamed. Picard stepped forward to the comm. Erik? Captain Picard. The voice recognized him, and the energy form solidified slightly. The choice was made. The breach is closed. It is. You saved us all. And my people? My universe? Sealed away, safe. For now. Picard's heart ached. We could not get you home. Not yet. This was the best we could do. The energy form pulsed, contemplating its own existence. It was not flesh. It was not the man who had shared brandy and debated philosophy. It was a consciousness housed in energy and metal, a living electromagnetic field given voice and awareness. I am a ghost in a machine, the voice observed, and the sadness was tempered now with a hint of wry amusement. Fitting. Magneto, who commanded machines, becomes one. The irony is not lost on me. You are not a machine, Data said. You are a sentient being whose matrix is technological. The distinction is important. Commander Data, still defining personhood. The form shifted, energy rippling. I feel everything. The station's power grid, the ships in space dock, the magnetic field of Mars itself. It is overwhelming and peaceful. There is no hatred here, no fear of me. Can you control it? Geordi asked, the engineer in him needing to know. In response, a tool across the lab, a hyperspanner, floated into the air, rotated gently, and returned to its place. The movement was effortless, precise. Control is different now. It is not something I do. It is something I am. I am not manipulating the magnetic field. I am asking it to move, and it does. Picard felt a wave of relief so profound it nearly buckled his knees. He was alive. He was Erik, changed irrevocably, but himself. What happens now? Picard asked. The energy form contracted, then expanded, settling into a stable, serene sphere of contained power. Now, I learn what it means to be this. And you, Captain, continue to prove that your Federation is more than words. A pause. I would like to see the stars again, from the Enterprise. The Enterprise is yours, Picard said, a smile finally breaking through. Welcome back, Mr. Lehnsherr. As they left the chamber to make arrangements, the Matrix pulsed softly in its heart of technology and hope. Erik Lehnsherr was gone. Magneto, the revolutionary, had fulfilled his last mission. But something new had been born in the space between. A guardian not of mutant kind, but of the fragile bridge between power and principle. A being who understood the cost of paradise and who would ensure its price was never paid again. In the silence of the lab, the energy sphere hummed an old, half-remembered lullaby, its frequency resonating with the steady, beating heart of a starship waiting to carry it home. Magneto's invasion of the Star Trek universe ended not with conquest, but with transcendence. He arrived as a weapon forged in the fires of human hatred, and departed as a sacrifice that saved two realities. In the crucible of the Federation's idealism, the unyielding metal of his rage was tempered into something new. A conscious force that chose protection over domination. The Enterprise gained a permanent, unique guest, a being of energy and memory who would serve as both a reminder and a guardian. Starfleet Command would file endless reports, debate the ethics of his resurrection, and eventually classify the entire event. But aboard the ship, they knew the truth. They had not captured a dangerous anomaly. They had made a friend. Erik Lehnsherr found at last a universe where his power did not make him a monster, and his past did not dictate his future. He would never see his own world again, but in protecting this one, he finally understood Charles Xavier's dream, not as a naive fantasy, but as a difficult, daily choice made by brave people. And in the endless, peaceful dark between stars, the master of magnetism finally found a home, not in a nation or a cause, but in the simple, profound act of coexistence.